Chapter 87. Li Tianyao stood there like a block of wood. His eyes were bulging and his mouth was wide open, trembling slightly. No, impossible. It wasn't just Li Tianyao. Most of the students stared blankly at the rankings on the spirit screen after they were teleported back to the flying palace, their faces full of disbelief. How could Li Daochong be first? Everyone was screaming in their hearts. How was this possible? The impact of this name appearing in first place was so shocking that no one cared about the rankings below. Even Gu Chao, who was second behind Li Daochong and also had a high score of 19,800, was ignored. In the flying palace, the headhunters who had finally found Li Daochong were extremely excited. They couldn't wait to kidnap this biggest dark horse in history and hide him in their cultivation companies. Li Daochong was currently surrounded by 3 layers of people inside and outside. The headhunters bombarded him with questions one after another. Some people even offered Li Daochong to join their companies in public. Just as Li Daochong looked helpless and didn't know how to deal with this group of overly excited headhunters, a deep voice was heard. Everyone, please exercise restraint and return to your seats. Don't mess up the process. I will now announce the rankings and prizes for this beta test. Yuan Longji stood at the front desk and looked down at the headhunters of the major cultivation companies, who were almost crazy. It wasn't that he hadn't expected such a scene. It was just that he never dreamed that the person being surrounded would be Li Daochong, the foolish young master who had been abandoned by the Li family. Yuan Longji had also heard rumors about Li Daochong. In his mind, such a student was nothing more than the black sheep of the school. If it weren't for the sake of money, Yuan Longji would never have allowed such a student to appear in the school. But now, the student he thought was the black sheep had become first place in the beta test. Even now, Yuan Longji still suspected that the ghost hunting planet's banished area wasn't strictly supervised, and that a powerful cultivator had concealed his aura and sneaked into the banished area to help Li Daochong obtain points. However, there was no way to investigate at the moment. They could only wait until after the matter was over before conducting an in-depth investigation. Shi Kuei and Xie Changjing both had gloomy expressions on their faces. Their hearts were filled with an uncomfortable feeling. They had already accepted that Vast Heaven University had obtained first place, but they had never even heard of the student who had obtained first place. Yuan Longji's voice wasn't loud, but it rang clearly in everyone's ears. The headhunters knew the rules, so they had to let Li Daochong go for the time being and return to their seat. Li Daochong, first place in this beta test, please come to the front desk to receive your prize. No matter how unwilling Yuan Longji was, he couldn't go back on his word in front of so many people. It was just that giving 3 prizes to a student like Li Daochong made him feel uncomfortable in his heart. The students standing below opened up a path, and Li Daochong walked out of the crowd. Li Daochong was tempted when he found out that the first place on the ghost hunting planet would receive 3 extra prizes. However, he knew how difficult it was to obtain first place. Therefore, Li Daochong didn't have much hope and only did his best. He didn't expect that he would obtain such a high score in the end. To a certain extent, Zhang Honglia's introduction had helped him a lot. Not only did he obtain a large amount of points, but he also easily obtained first place. Otherwise, he didn't know how long it would have taken to fight Orson. Even if he won, Li Daochong would have suffered a great loss. At that time, if Zhang Honglai appeared again, Li Daochong would be in an extremely dangerous situation. Li Daochong was suddenly excited when he walked to the front desk. When the 3 prizes were placed in front of him, he really wanted them. The heavy silver essence crystal, 9 split saber art, and foundation elixir were all very useful to him. It didn't matter if he sold them or kept them for himself. His current weapon of choice was also a saber. Li Daochong didn't know any other cultivation techniques other than the basic cultivation technique. He might be able to hold on for a while in the qi refining stage, but in the qi gathering stage, relying on the basic cultivation technique alone, He might not even be able to take a single blow from others. The qi gathering stage and the qi refining stage were two completely different worlds. Among the students, Hua Xiaoling covered her arm and looked at Li Daochong in astonishment. At this moment, her intestines turned green with regret. Hua Xiaoling followed Hongwu. The first 2 days were safe, but in the last half of the day, Hongwu was besieged by several students from the elite class from the other 2 schools. He couldn't even take care of himself, let alone Hua Xiaoling. In the last 3 hours, Hongwu directly abandoned Hua Xiaoling and slipped away by himself. As a result, Hua Xiaoling was chased and beaten by another student from the elite class. If she didn't have several life-saving trump cards on her, she would have been beaten to a pulp. In the end, after using up all her trump cards, Hua Xiaoling had no choice but to use her own teleportation talisman to return to the Flying Sky Hall. Following Hongwu didn't bring her any benefits. In the end, her score stopped at 900 and she was ranked 538. She didn't even make it into the top 500. In Hua Xiaoling's opinion, no matter how strong Li Daochong was, it was impossible for him to be stronger than Hongwu. But when she returned to the Flying Sky Hall and saw the score behind Li Daochong's name, she was stunned. Until now, she still hadn't come back to her senses. When she saw that Li Qingyao was ranked 130th, she felt terrible. On the second day on the ghost-hunting planet, Hua Xiaoling used her family's sensing artifact to track down Li Daochong's approximate location. She had a chance to find a new backer. In the end, she chose Hongwu. Student Li, congratulations on coming in first place in this exam. These 3 prizes are an affirmation of your first-year cultivation results. I hope that you will continue to work hard in the future and build your foundation as soon as possible. You will become a cultivator and contribute to the Shenghua Federation's resistance against the Hades as soon as possible, Yuan Longji said in a businesslike manner. However, his eyes were still full of suspicion when he looked at Li Daochong. After speaking, Yuan Longji was about to pass the 3 prizes to Li Daochong when someone in the crowd suddenly shouted, "I object." As soon as the voice fell, several voices came from different directions, rising and falling one after another. "I object too." "Me too." Everyone looked puzzled. The voices of objection came from the crowd of students, and there were at least dozens of them. Yuan Longji's hand paused. Shi Kuei, who was beside him, rolled his eyes and said, "Why do you object?" The 3 principals inadvertently looked at each other. They seemed to see the possibility of taking back the prizes. The value of the prizes that the 3 of them took out was not ordinary. It was inevitable that they would feel the pinch if they gave them away for nothing, especially to a student like Li Daochong. They were even more unwilling. Li Daochong violated the rules of the exam. When he was snatching points on the ghost-hunting planet, he was ruthless and almost killed a student. Chen Puhua walked out of the crowd of students and looked coldly at Li Daochong as he said this word by word. Shi Kuei expressed his doubts. The way he looked at Li Daochong became unfriendly. His turbid eyes narrowed slightly, and he was secretly delighted. As long as a student accused someone of killing another person, an investigation must be conducted. If the investigation turned out to be true, the first-place qualification would be revoked, and the serious cases would be taken away by the Security Bureau for investigation. This student, you have to be responsible for what you said. I don't know if you have evidence. If you don't, you are slandering me. Xie Changjing sounded like a warning, but in fact, she was testing the informant. Yes. As Chen Puhua spoke, he raised the watch in his hand and projected a video. The entire video was very short, lasting only a few seconds. In the video, Li Daochong raised the Zamadeo in his hand and was about to cut down a student who had lost the ability to resist. As soon as the video was shown, there was an uproar in the Celestial Hall. Only Zhan Honglai had an ugly expression on his face because the student who had lost the ability to resist was his son, Zhan Honglai. Looking at the video, Li Daochong frowned. He didn't expect Jean Honglie's group to have such a trick up their sleeve. Student Li, you actually dared to be so ruthless to your own classmate. If you become a cultivator one day, will you also kill your companions and comrades? How are you any different from the dark ghost if you are so ruthless? Yuan Longji said in a low voice. Principal Yuan, don't you think it's a little too arbitrary for you to come to such a conclusion based on a few seconds of footage? They were the ones who wanted to kill me first. I was just defending myself. Should I stretch out my neck for others to kill me? Li Daochong didn't expect Yuan Longji to come to such a serious conclusion based on a video. He couldn't help but ask angrily. Impudent! Impudent! How dare you speak to your senior like that? Putting aside Headmaster Yuan's identity, just based on his age, he could be your grandfather. In front of so many people, you dared to talk back to your senior. In private, you can imagine. Li Daochong, you shameless bastard. You still dare to quibble with irrefutable evidence. What right does trash like you have to get first place? Chen Puhua shouted. Before Chen Puhua's voice fell, a beautiful figure flashed over. But a crisp sound resounded through the celestial hall. Half of Chen Puhua's face was swollen and 3 of his teeth had fallen out. He looked at Chu Qianyue, who had suddenly arrived with a terrified expression. Next time you speak with a dirty word, be careful or I'll break your mouth. Chapter 88. Li Daochong looked at Chu Qianyue with slight surprise. He didn't expect that Chu Qianyue, who had always been indifferent to him, would stand up for him at this time. A dignified special class lecturer dares to punish a student in public. Chu Qianyue, isn't this inappropriate? Lian Bin said angrily after receiving Zhang Zhentian's hint. Chen Puhua covered his face in anger but didn't dare to say anything. Everyone knew Chu Qianyue's name. She wasn't someone he could afford to offend. Lian Bin, a country has its laws, a family has its rules, and a school has its rules. Our Xian University has been established for hundreds of years and has always been strictly disciplined. As a first-class lecturer of Xian University, you should know how to punish people who spread rumors, slander, right? Qian Chonghai said with a smile. Of course I know. Spreading rumors, slandering our school depends on the severity of the case. If the case is light, the punishment will be slapped. If the case is heavy, the punishment will be the destruction of the spirit vein and handed over to the Cultivation Safety Bureau. Lian Bin immediately replied. But after he finished speaking, Lian Bin's eyes revealed a trace of doubt. He didn't know why Qian Chonghai, who had always been indecent, would suddenly come out and ask him this question. It was a bit baffling. In that case, Chu Qianyue, why did you say that you were punishing a student? This student only released a few seconds of video and concluded that Li Daochong was guilty. If this isn't slander, then what is? The Shenghua Federation pays attention to the cultivation law. Our Xian University wouldn't judge a student guilty just based on 1 or 2 videos. Am I right, Lian Bin? Qian Chonghai's smile on his old face became even wider. After Chu Qianyue slapped Chen Puhua without saying anything, everyone present was somewhat angry. But after listening to the conversation between Qian Chonghai and Lian Bin, their expressions changed a bit and they assumed a stance of waiting to see what would happen. Lian Bin couldn't say anything. He turned to Chen Puhua and asked, Do you have any other evidence? Chen Puhua even had the heart to die at this moment. Originally, he thought that with the Zhan family as his backing, he could easily pull Li Daochong down with just a few words. The 2 teachers, Lian Bin and Tian Bo, were both frequent guests of the Zhan family. Their relationship was extremely good. With both sides working together, Li Daochong's first place would definitely be ruined. But Chen Puhua never dreamed that Chu Qianyue would slap him in the face. Obviously, she wanted to help Li Daochong. That aside, even the vice dean of the Cultivation Academy, Qian Chonghai, had stepped forward to speak up. Although he wasn't clearly siding with Li Daochong, Once he stepped forward, there was no way the matter could be brushed off half-heartedly. When Chen Puhua turned to look at Zhang Honglai in the crowd, he was about to cry. Right now, he didn't know what to do at all. Zhang Honglai was very shrewd. As soon as he saw that things weren't right, he retreated into the crowd and didn't stick his head out anymore. He had just received a message from Zhang Zhentian telling him not to touch Li Daochong for the time being and to wait until he got back. Chen Puhua was dumbfounded when he saw Zhang Honglai take a few steps back after glancing at him and disappear into the crowd. "Student, I'm asking you a question. Where are you looking? Is there any other evidence?" Lian Bin frowned. Chen Puhua turned around and braced himself. "No, that's all I got." Lian Bin was furious. He glared at Chen Puhua and said, "That's all you got?" Chen Puhua nodded. His expression was tangled up. He wanted to cry but had no tears. He shouted in his heart, "Teacher Lian, can you stop asking me?" Lian Bin was also angry. "You brat, you only have so little evidence in your hands and you dare to F***king testify against Li Daochong? Is there shit in your head?" After Lian Bin received Zhang Zhentian's message, he thought that the Zhang family had already set everything up and had solid evidence of Li Daochong killing other students. He didn't expect that this wasn't the case at all. Zhang Zhentian just wanted to use his position to bully Li Daochong. If Li Daochong didn't have anyone behind him, then it would be fine. Lian Bin could make Li Daochong fall into eternal damnation with just a few words. But now, everyone knew that Li Daochong was a genius discovered by Chu Qianyue. Zhang Zhentian knew this, but he didn't have absolute confidence and ordered a stupid student to testify against Li Daochong. "Zhang Zhentian, aren't you F***king trying to harm me? You want to embarrass me in front of so many people?" Lian Bin's face was ashen. He turned around and glanced at Zhang Zhentian. Shi Kuei and Xie Changjing couldn't say much about the internal affairs of vast heaven. However, the two old men saw that the items they released might be taken back. With just a few words from Qian Chonghai, it seemed like it was going to be ruined. Naturally, they were unwilling. However, in front of so many people, they couldn't use their status to suppress people. They could only use this as a pretext. Since this student had testified against Li Daochong and even took a picture of the murder, it at least meant that there was a conflict at the time. As for the ins and outs of the matter, there might be other secrets. However, no matter what secrets there were, the fact that Li Daochong was ruthless in killing people existed. Shi Kuei saw that Lian Bin didn't speak, so he said, "I think it's better to ask the Invigilator to come over and ask. Although the spirit eye isn't allowed to be opened, everything that happens in the banished area is under the Invigilator's supervision. The Invigilator will record some images according to the situation. Maybe it's the cause and effect of the conflict between Li Daochong and this student." When this was said, Chen Puhua really wanted to bang his head against the wall and die. Zhang Honglai, who was hidden in the crowd, had an even more serious expression. He felt uneasy. His father had sent him a message saying that the spirit eye had been closed, but he had asked him to pay attention to the Invigilator. In the end, Zhang Honglai thought that he could hide from the Invigilator's eyes by driving the flying shuttle into the Ghost Valley. Who would have thought that he had underestimated the Invigilator's strength? Even that kind of nook and cranny was monitored by the Invigilator. As soon as Shi Kuei finished speaking, Xie Changjing whispered a few words to a female lecturer beside her. Then, the female lecturer walked down from the front desk and went to the lounge behind the Flying Sky Hall. Not long after, more than 10 Invigilators walked out. One of the young men was the Invigilator who had stopped Li Daochong from killing Zhang Honglai. He was Wang Guanglei, a third-grade lecturer at Scarlet Sun University, the #1 famous school on Scarlet Sun Planet. He was a new lecturer who had just joined the school and did not have much experience. This time, he had been assigned the difficult task of invigilating the Blue Bay Stars end-of-term test. He would not be able to sleep for 3 days and 3 nights. If anything happened within the scope of invigilation, it would be his responsibility. After Shi Kuei explained the situation, Wang Guanglei's face showed a hint of surprise. The way he looked at Li Daochong changed. He did not expect that this student would actually be number one in the end-of-term test. What did it mean to be number one in the end-of-term test? Wang Guanglei, who had just become a third-grade lecturer, was very clear about it. In the future, there was a very high chance that he would succeed in building his foundation. Even if he was unlucky and did not step into the ranks of cultivators, it could be said that he would reach the qi-gathering realm. At worst, he could stay in the school and become a lecturer like Wang Guanglei. If he was lucky, he could even work in a large cultivation company. There was no need to talk about his status and identity. In short, he would definitely surpass Wang Guanglei. Wang Guanglei was only a student of the elite class on Scarlet Sun Planet and had never entered the top 50 in the end-of-term test. After knowing the ins and outs of the matter, Wang Guanglei smiled slightly and said, "In my invigilation area, there were some extreme conflicts. Student Li Daochong did make a ruthless move on a student, but I stopped him." As soon as he said this, there was an uproar in the Skysoar Hall. All the students looked at Li Daochong with anger in their eyes. Killing a fellow student was unacceptable to most of the students. The group of headhunters looked at each other in dismay. They began to re-evaluate Li Daochong in their hearts. No matter how talented a person was, if he had a problematic temperament, he would be troublesome to work with in the future. No cultivation company would be willing to hire a person who did not have the spirit of teamwork. Chen Puhua's tearless expression suddenly froze. The corner of his mouth revealed a trace of a sinister smile. His heart was set. With the invigilator's words, Li Daochong's number one spot was gone. He would definitely be investigated. Zhang Honglia's heart was even more shaken. His hidden figure stood up a little more. He had a sinister smile on his face, as if he could already see the scene of Li Daochong being held accountable, convicted, and having his number one spot taken away. Chu Qinyue's cold and beautiful face revealed a trace of unconcealable anger. She looked at Wang Guanglei with an unfriendly expression. After 2 months of getting along with him, she was very clear about this brat Li Daochong's personality. This guy would definitely not kill someone for no reason. Qian Changhai's face, which had been smiling all this time, became somewhat stiff. As the person involved, Li Daochong's face was calm. If this invigilator did not distinguish right from wrong and slandered him, then there was no need for him to cultivate in this kind of education system. As for the number one spot and the prize, he did not need it. He had his own level-up system, so he could cultivate anywhere. Li Daochong was not the least bit afraid of being investigated. A straight foot is not afraid of a crooked shadow. He wanted to kill Zhang Honglai, but that was because Zhang Honglai wanted to kill him first. He even took Li Qinyao and Ouyang Qian as hostages. Oh? So, Li Daochong really did violate the rules of the major testing? Shi Kuei's eyes lit up. He seemed to have already seen the foundation establishment liquid he had given away for no reason return. Not really. Wang Guanglei took a deep breath. Everyone suddenly pricked up their ears. Shi Kuei was stunned for a moment. He did not expect this young invigilator to change the topic. Could he not keep people in suspense? Shi Kuei's old face twitched slightly. Wang Guanglei did not say anything. He just raised his watch and played a video. Li Daochong was tied to a flying shuttle and thrown out. The whole video took about 10 minutes. The cause and effect of the whole incident was played word for word. Zhang Zhentian had already quietly left the VIP seats when the video was halfway through and left from the back. Zhang Honglia's face turned green and white. The scene of him being completely abused by Li Daochong was shown to everyone. It also included the scene of the Green Wolf Society's group of playboys holding Ouyang Qian and Li Qinyao hostage. When the scene of Chen Puhua threatening Li Daochong and stabbing Li Qinyao with a knife appeared, someone in the student group cursed. Bastard! Chen Puhua's vision went black. He fell to the ground and fainted. Jean Honglia's legs went soft. He lost his balance and sat on the ground. The meaning of shooting yourself in the foot was perfectly illustrated at this moment. Chapter 89. After Wang Guanglei finished replaying the entire incident, he didn't say anything. He turned off his wristwatch and stood to the side, inadvertently glancing at Li Daochong. Li Daochong glanced at Wang Guanglei too. The latter smiled and stood to the side with his hands behind his back. The headhunters in the Sky Ascension Hall were excited once more. Li Daochong wasn't afraid of coercion and bravely saved people, disregarding his own life and death. For a cultivation company, this kind of behavior was more important than potential growth value. The students of the three schools looked at Li Daochong in a new light, especially those from Xuanzang University. Many students who had been bullied by the members of the Green Wolf Society applauded him. Only some students from the elite class looked at Li Daochong in surprise. Jean Honglia's strength might not be the best, but he was one of the top students in Blue Bay Star. His strength was definitely around the top 20. Before the big exam, the news that Jean Honglai had broken through to the 9th stage of Qi refinement had already spread. Many students from the elite class didn't take the initiative to provoke Jean Honglai after collecting the information. However, Jean Honglai couldn't even take one move from Li Daochong. The gap between their strength was like a chasm. Some students knew that Li Daochong had a slight advantage in the fierce battle with Orson. Immediately, they looked at Li Daochong with more respect. After Qiao Sinuo was sent back to the Flying Palace, he stood among the crowd and stared blankly at the spiritual screen. Until now, he still couldn't believe that Li Daochong had won first place. It felt like a dream. How could a silly young master, who had been abandoned by his family, be so strong? Li Daochong had been holding back, silently enduring the ridicule and discrimination from the people around him. How much patience and determination did it take? In Qiao Sinuo's opinion, Li Daochong must have been hiding his strength for some reason. Otherwise, there was no way to explain his sudden outburst. After all, even the three superstars of Blue Bay Star, Gu Chao, Okikan, and Orson had been suppressed by him. Is Li Daochong really my brother-in-law? Qiao Sinuo suddenly felt unreal. Qiao Sinuo wasn't the only one. All the other girls looked resentful. Qiao Shima has made a killing this time. Isn't that so? Who knew that Li Daochong would be so strong after replacing his spirit vein? Young Master Jean couldn't even take a single punch. Don't you think that Li Daochong is actually quite handsome? Fair and clean, with well-defined facial features. Come on, it's too late to say anything now. Li Daochong is already taken. So what if he's taken? It's not like the Federation forbids divorce. Besides, it's normal for powerful cultivators to have several dual cultivation partners. It's a bit early to say that. It's true that Li Daochong has become powerful, but I'm afraid it's not certain that he can build his foundation. As long as he doesn't build his foundation, no matter how powerful he is, he's just a cultivator. He's still far from a cultivator. The girls argued among themselves. Many of them regretted that they didn't get close to Li Daochong back then. Behind the group of girls, Yi Renfei sat in a wheelchair with an extremely gloomy expression. Li Shumei looked at Li Daochong on the podium in shock. The silly guy in her memory had now become the focus of everyone's attention and obtained the highest honor among the younger generation of Blue Bay Star, first place in the final exam. Li Shumei's mood was complicated at the moment. She couldn't explain it clearly. Shumei, I heard that Li Daochong pursued you in high school. A girl suddenly turned to look at Li Shumei and asked. That's right. At that time, Li Daochong was fascinated by Shumei. Unfortunately, Shumei didn't like him, a girl from a big family said sarcastically. Some things are just so mysterious. When it's right in front of you, you feel that it's sticky, so you try your best to get rid of it. When you really get rid of it, you realize that what you've gotten rid of is gold. When you want to pick it up again, it's already too late because someone else has already picked it up and taken it away. Another pretty girl with a bulging chest rolled her eyes at Li Xuemei. This girl had some history with Li Xuemei, so her voice was especially loud. Yi Renfei's expression was extremely gloomy. On the ghost hunting star, he had been attacked by 3 students from other schools and was injured. If he hadn't used the teleportation talisman to come back, he would have died. However, even though he had kept his original points, Yi Renfei's ranking had plummeted to below 200. Because Li Xuemei didn't go to Shang City, and instead hunted dark ghosts in the outer and inner regions, she ran away whenever she encountered a strong enemy. In the end, she obtained more than 5,000 points and was ranked 133rd, much higher than Yi Renfei. Why aren't you saying anything? Are you regretting following me and not choosing that fool? Yi Renfei waited for the girls to leave before asking in a low voice. Renfei, don't think too much. I don't think so. Li Xuemei gritted her teeth and replied. You don't think so? If you don't think so, then why aren't you saying anything? Li Xuemei, don't think that I don't know that you didn't want Li Daochong because he couldn't provide you with any more resources, but I can. Don't pretend to be pure in front of me, Yi Renfei said coldly. Renfei, you. Li Xuemei was so angry that she couldn't speak. Even Li Xuemei herself didn't know if she regretted it or not. In short, seeing Li Daochong become the focus of everyone's attention, there was an indescribable feeling in her heart. Li Xuemei was also a member of the Li family, but she belonged to the side branch, while Li Daochong was the main branch. Because Li Xuemei's father was Li Tianyang's subordinate, the two of them were often together since they were young. It could be said that they were childhood sweethearts. After they grew up, they developed feelings for each other. At that time, Li Daochong really treated Li Xuemei as his own woman. Although he was a little stupid, he was very loyal and pure in love. He would grant Li Xuemei's every request. Unfortunately, Li Xuemei was ambitious. In addition to wanting to reach the foundation establishment stage, she wanted to find a powerful male cultivator as a partner, rather than marrying a mentally disabled person and spending the rest of her life with him. Of course, for the current Li Daochong, everything in the past was just a memory, nothing more. Bitch, do you want to do the same thing again and abandon me to find Li Daochong? The more Yi Renfei spoke, the angrier he became. Renfei, I didn't. How can you say that? Tears flickered in Li Xuemei's eyes, and her voice trembled as she replied. Still trying to quibble. Don't think that I don't know what you've been thinking about for the past year. Even if you didn't think about Li Daochong, I'm afraid that you had someone else in your heart before. You saw that my cultivation was increasing very slowly in the past year, and I wasn't a native of Blue Bay Star. My family's influence isn't here, so your attitude towards me was clearly much colder. You didn't even go with me during the end-of-term exam, causing me to be ganged up on and beat up. You still say that you didn't? Yi Renfei's eyes were bloodshot. Renfei, don't say any more. I really didn't. I just felt that my strength wasn't enough to contend against the students of the elite class. I didn't want to take the risk, but you refused to listen to me, Li Xuemei explained. Blue Bay Star's elite class is a joke. How can a mere fourth-class cultivation planet compare to me, who comes from a third-class cultivation planet? Li Xuemei, I'll tell you the truth. I was just sent to a small place like Blue Bay Star to gain experience. In a few months, my aunt will come to pick me up and remove the seal on my body. At that time, I will let the entire Blue Bay Star know what a true genius is. Gu Chao and Aokachuan are just jokes. As for this Li Daochong, I can easily destroy him with a single finger, Yi Renfei said fiercely. Renfei, don't make wild guesses. Since I chose you back then, I won't be disloyal. Please believe me, Li Xuemei said with a pleading tone as she held back her tears. It's best if it's like what you said. Otherwise, with the power of our Yi family, let alone your Li family, Even the entire Blue Bay Star won't be able to withstand a single finger of our Yi family, Yi Renfei said disdainfully. On the platform, Li Daochong naturally didn't know about the conversation between Li Xuemei and Yi Renfei. Of course, he didn't need to know. The ins and outs of the entire incident were already very clear. Li Daochong was just defending himself. Although it was a little excessive, it was still pardonable. At the very least, it wasn't considered a violation of the rules of the beta test. On the contrary, it was Chen Puhua, Zhan Honglai, and the other hedonistic sons who had deliberately kidnapped Li Daochong. The facts were clear and the evidence was conclusive. However, these playboys all had powerful families behind them. If it was just one of them, it might not be a big deal. However, with more than 10 of them together, even the 4 great families would have to think twice about it. Therefore, even though the evidence was conclusive, no one dared to expose the matter. The entire sky-soaring hall fell into a deep silence. Yuan Longji didn't show the slightest bit of joy that his school's student had obtained first place. Instead, he felt that it was very troublesome. It was good that Li Daochong had won first place and became a hot commodity, but this hot commodity was very hot. Li Daochong had offended so many families. Yuan Longji knew very well how powerful these families were when they joined forces. Because this was a collective incident, even if the evidence was conclusive, he couldn't expose it. Otherwise, he would be going against more than 10 families. Among them, 2 or 3 families had very deep ties with some families on third-class cultivation planet. Even the Cultivation Security Bureau couldn't afford to offend them. When Yuan Longji saw that Shi Kuei and Xie Changjing didn't speak, he narrowed his eyes and said, since Li Daochong didn't break the rules, he's still the first place of the major examination. However, due to some disputes, the previously promised prize won't be awarded to him for the time being. I hereby announce that the major examination is officially over. Let's return to Blue Bay Star. Wait a minute. As soon as Yuan Longji finished speaking, Li Daochong's indifferent voice was heard. Everyone was stunned and looked at the first-place winner, who had garnered a lot of attention in this major examination. Li Daochong, if you feel that this matter wasn't handled properly, you can file a complaint after returning to Blue Bay Star. It's getting late, you should go back. Yuan Longji stared at Li Daochong as he spoke. There was a hint of warning in his eyes. Kid, that's enough. Don't push your luck. You've already obtained first place. What else do you want? Principal Yuan, Zhan Honglai and Chen Puhua ganged up with a group of students to kidnap and kill me. Are we just going to let it go like this? Li Daochong said word by word. Li Daochong, we will investigate this matter in detail when we return to Blue Bay Star. For now, we will put this matter aside and give you an explanation, Yuan Longji said in a deep voice. There was a trace of displeasure on his old face. I want an explanation now. Li Daochong's eyes were filled with determination. He ignored Yuan Longji's threat. The atmosphere in the Skysore Palace suddenly became tense. In the VIP seats, the group of hedonistic young masters and elders who had been invited to observe all glared angrily at Li Daochong, thinking that this kid was too ignorant. Li Daochong knew very well that if he didn't resolve this matter in front of so many people, this matter would be completely forgotten when they returned to Blue Bay Star. Li Daochong knew that now was the best time for him to get rid of this group of people in one fell swoop. If he missed this opportunity, it would be very troublesome. As long as he could convict them first, he would have more time. Chapter 90. What kind of explanation do you want? Yuan Longji asked with a gloomy face. Kidnapping hostages and attempted murder. Why didn't you inform the Security Bureau now? Why did you cancel the prize for first place? Li Daochong looked at Yuan Longji and questioned him without the slightest fear. Yuan Longji's complexion became even more unsightly as he said, I already said that this matter still needs to be investigated. The prize was cancelled because your behavior was too extreme and your self-defense was excessive. If there is a reason for this, you should know your limit. Don't tell me that you should be allowed to kill people? Li Daochong sneered. When someone identified me just now, why didn't anyone say that there was a need to investigate? I had no choice but to defend myself excessively. If they didn't force me, would I have attacked them? Why did they cancel what should have been mine? Yuan Longji didn't expect that Li Daochong would have the guts to question him in front of so many people. His old face suddenly turned ashen and he wished he could chop Li Daochong into pieces. However, when Yuan Longji sensed the aura emitted from Chu Qianyue's body, he immediately suppressed the thought of chopping Li Daochong into pieces. Chu Qianyue was the only Foundation establishment lecturer on Blue Bay Star. Whether it was fame or strength, she was extraordinary. Yuan Longji didn't want to have a conflict with Chu Qianyue. Behind her stood Qian Changhai. That old man didn't look serious on the surface, but after all, he had been glorious in the past. Yuan Longji couldn't guess how strong Qian Changhai was. This old guy had been working at Xian Tsang University for more than 100 years and had always been the vice dean of the Cultivation Academy. His qualifications were much older than Yuan Longji's. It was said that Qian Changhai had the cultivation of Jin Dan stage, but no one had ever seen Qian Changhai fight with anyone. In the school, this old guy who was not serious did nothing other than watching movies. For more than 100 years, the only thing he did was to bring Chu Qianyue back to Xian Tsang University from who knows where. If the two of them weren't standing behind Li Daochong, Yuan Longji would have already used his pressure to cause internal injuries to Li Daochong. Principal Yuan, in my opinion, it is indeed inappropriate to cancel student Li's prize. The prize should be given to him, an elder in the VIP seat said. The elder and Yuan Longji glanced at each other. The latter immediately understood the elder's meaning. The elder's meaning was very simple. Take the money to avoid trouble. Li Daochong was so agitated right now, most likely because of the cancellation of the generous prize, which made him angry out of shame. As long as the prize was given to him, he shouldn't make a fuss. I wonder if any of the lecturers have any objections to Elder Yuan's suggestion? Yuan Longji asked for their opinions. The lecturers looked at each other. The extra prize was originally a spontaneous decision made by the three principals. What was the point of asking them? Naturally, no one responded. If no one objects, then no objection. In that case, Li Daochong, you can take the prize. After saying this, Yuan Longji took out the 3 items and handed them over. Li Daochong naturally didn't refuse. He took the items and put them into his storage bag. Almost at the same time, Yuan Longji calmly transmitted a message to him. Li Daochong, you've already taken the prize and won first place. When you return to Blue Bay Star, there will be many cultivation companies looking for you to sign contracts with. At that time, you'll be free to choose. Your cultivation path will be bright in the future. As for your grudge with those brats, put it aside for the time being. When you return to Blue Bay Star, you can go to the Security Bureau and report the case. Yuan Longji used telekinesis to transmit his message. Apart from Li Daochong, no one else could hear it. This kind of transmission was extremely covert and couldn't be recorded or detected. With the heavy silver essence crystal, 9-split saber art, and Foundation establishment elixir in hand, Li Daochong's mood improved slightly. However, there was no way he would let those brats go. Yuan Longji said it lightly. If Li Daochong really returned to Blue Bay Star, he was afraid that he would have to face the wrath of more than a dozen families. On the surface, they might be afraid of the Security Bureau, but it was unknown what kind of tricks they were playing behind the scenes. With the strength of these families, if they wanted to trip Li Daochong up, it would be enough to make Li Daochong suffer. Li Daochong had to make a big deal out of this matter no matter what. Those who had nothing to lose were not afraid of those who wore shoes. Since he was going to die anyway, he might as well fight to the death. Principal Yuan, since you don't want to report the case in the name of the school, I'll have to do it myself, Li Daochong said with a calm face. Yuan Longji couldn't believe his ears. This Li Daochong actually ignored his advice and insisted on going against him. He had already taken the 3 super prizes, but he still didn't give up. This was a challenge to his status, and even a provocation. It was a slap to his face as the principal. Yuan Longji sent another telepathic message over. Li Daochong, have you had enough? You're still young and have a great future. Don't destroy your future because of a moment of loyalty. I'm helping you by telling you not to pursue the case. Li Daochong's face changed slightly. He knew that Yuan Longji was most likely afraid of the family forces behind the dozen playboys. However, as the principal of a school, he bowed his head to the influential people. It was really unworthy of his reputation. It was no wonder that after so many years, he had reached the foundation establishment stage at the age of 30 and broke through to the Jin Dan stage at the age of 80. After the breakthrough, he had stagnated at the early stage of Jin Dan stage. Li Daochong thought about it and decided to give Yuan Longji some face. He also transmitted a message using telekinesis. Principal Yuan, if you really want to help me, punish those playboys according to the rules of the mysterious firmament school. If you don't want to, then I'll have to solve it myself. Yuan Longji's expression showed a trace of surprise. He looked at Li Daochong with a bit of doubt. Qi refining stage can also use telekinesis? Yuan Longji felt a chill run down his spine. A dignified Jin Dan stage cultivator was actually frightened by a Qi refining stage cultivator. Yuan Longji was really shocked. Telekinesis can only be used after reaching the middle stage of Qi gathering stage. Otherwise, there is no way to use telekinesis. Li Tianyang? Hiss. Yuan Longji couldn't help but inwardly suck in a breath of cold air. Suddenly, he seemed to see Li Tianyang's domineering figure appear behind Li Daochong. Li Tianyang was once the #1 expert of Blue Bay Star. Even Yuan Longji, a veteran Jin Dan stage cultivator, had a deep fear and dread in his heart. Could it be that Li Tianyang was not seriously injured like the rumors said? Was he just pretending? The corner of Yuan Longji's eyes twitched. If Li Tianyang was really pretending to be seriously injured, then his strength in Blue Bay Star could crush everything. Besides Li Tianyang, Yuan Longji couldn't imagine who could make Li Daochong become so powerful in such a short time. He even knew how to use telekinesis. Li Daochong's calmness made Yuan Longji speculate. If he only relied on Chu Qianyue and Qian Changhai, he wouldn't be so confident. Chu Qianyue had already submitted her resignation. After the end of the beta test, she would no longer be a special class lecturer in Xiansong University. It was said that she would leave Blue Bay Star to deal with some personal matters. Chu Qianyue could protect Li Daochong, but she couldn't protect him forever. Even if Chu Qianyue didn't leave, her strength wasn't enough to shake the encirclement of more than a dozen families. Although Qian Changhai was very mysterious, there was a reason why he ended up in this situation. It was said that he offended the Federation's higher-ups and had to live in seclusion. Even if he wanted to support Li Daochong, he didn't dare to make too big of a commotion. Otherwise, it would be disadvantageous to himself. However, Li Tianyang was different. Whether it was strength or temperament, he was a powerful figure. Li Daochong was his son. As long as he still had a breath, it was impossible for him to leave his son alone. At this time, Li Daochong was somewhat unfathomable in Yuan Longji's eyes. You do as you see fit. This matter is beyond the scope of what the school can manage. Yuan Longji weighed again and said something that he wouldn't offend anyone. The complexions of more than a dozen family elders in the VIP seats suddenly changed. They all looked at Li Daochong. Some of them even attacked Li Daochong. However, Li Daochong, who had a strong telekinesis, wasn't afraid. These elders were only at the Qi gathering stage. their power wasn't enough to make Li Daochong feel uncomfortable. Of course, Chu Qianwei also helped Li Daochong resist a large part of the power. The cold expression on her beautiful face became even colder. Since the school can't do anything about it, I can only report it to the police, Li Daochong said as he raised his wristwatch and dialed the spiritual network number of the Cultivation Security Bureau. The call was quickly connected. Li Daochong didn't hide anything and directly turned up the volume to the maximum. A solemn but gentle female voice came from the other end. Li Daochong immediately explained the matter and told Li Daochong where he was. The police station told him to wait for half an hour. The Cultivation Security Bureau's patrol shuttle would arrive as soon as possible. When Li Daochong turned off his wristwatch, the flying sky hall was dead silent. The headhunters of the cultivation companies looked at each other in dismay and removed Li Daochong's name from the observation list. Many cultivation companies were inextricably linked to these families. Li Daochong had offended so many families. If they recruited Li Daochong into the company, it would only cause trouble for the company. If Li Daochong's talent was really heaven-defying, he would definitely reach the foundation establishment stage in the future. If he couldn't reach the foundation establishment stage, then the gains wouldn't make up for the losses of offending so many families for a cultivator at the qi gathering stage. The probability of reaching the foundation establishment stage was small, and the probability of replacing a spirit vein was even smaller. After weighing the pros and cons, it was only natural that the headhunters would choose to stand on the side of these families. Of course, the 7 major cultivation companies weren't afraid of a mere dozen families on a fourth-class cultivation planet. It wasn't a big deal even if they joined forces. However, the 7 major cultivation companies didn't attach much importance to Blue Bay Star. The recruiters they sent were all small clerks who had been stationed on Blue Bay Star for a long time. These guys usually received a lot of benefits from these families. Some of the recruiters would even secretly sell some insignificant positions in the company. The dozens of VIPs who had been invited to observe the situation all had ugly expressions on their faces. They felt that Li Daochong was taking it too seriously. The Li family's chief steward, Li Tianxing, had watched the entire process, but he hadn't said a word from beginning to end. The shock on Li Tianxing's face gradually eased after Li Daochong reported the case, and he inadvertently revealed a faint smile. Li Daochong had offended so many people at once. This was exactly what he wanted to see. After Li Daochong won first place, Li Tianxing had been worrying about how difficult it would be to deal with Li Tianyang and his father in the future. He hadn't expected that this kid would actually dig a hole for himself. This was for the best. It would save the Li family the trouble of scheming. Everyone had their own little plans, and half an hour passed quickly in silence. A pure black small shuttle more than 20 meters long and 7 meters wide flew into the Skysoar Hall from beyond the starry sky. 2 cultivators wearing the Cultivation Security Bureau's special service uniform stepped out of the shuttle. Both of them were at the middle stage of the qi condensation realm. Chapter 91. The Federation Cultivation Security Bureau represented the government of the Federation. The 2 Secret Service agents didn't have high cultivation, but their appearance immediately shocked everyone present. The principals of the 3 schools were Jin Dan cultivators, but they didn't dare to say anything. The Secret Service agents went about their official business. They collected evidence, investigated, and inquired. Then, they copied Wang Guanglei's spirit vision image for the record. The whole process was fast but very strict. The Secret Service agents didn't say anything unnecessary. After they were done, they told Li Daochong and his group of rich kids to report to the Tianyuan City Security Bureau within 3 days after returning to Blue Bay Star. Then, they drove the patrolling shuttle out of the Ghost Hunting Stars Flying Heaven Hall. After the Secret Service agents left, Yuan Longji announced the end of the beta test and returned to Blue Bay Star. the students of the three schools returned to their respective shuttles. The students with serious injuries continued to recuperate in the Flying Heaven Hall. After they recovered, they would be transferred to Blue Bay Star for recovery treatment. The end of the semester beta test was officially over. After returning, more than 10 families secretly made connections. On Xian University's shuttle, the atmosphere was very strange. A headhunter secretly found Li Daochong, hoping that he would consider joining their company, but not publicly for the time being. Li Daochong naturally didn't agree. He didn't plan to join any cultivation company yet. After all, his official cultivation career had just begun, and only a year had passed in university. After Chu Qianwei and Qian Chonghai boarded the shuttle, they met Li Daochong. Chu Qianwei came to say goodbye, but her attitude was still cold. However, she expressed her support for Li Daochong. She also told Li Daochong that before this matter was settled, she wouldn't leave Blue Bay Star, but she wouldn't stay at Xian University. After sending off his 2 teachers, Li Daochong wanted to rest for a while, but who knew that people would come in an endless stream. Qiao Sinuo, Hua Shaoling, and Ouyang Qian came together to congratulate him. Li Daochong's room was never free. People kept coming to visit. Half a day later, no one came again. Li Daochong had been meditating for half a day when the flying space shuttle finally arrived at Blue Bay Star. The first thing Li Daochong did after disembarking from the shuttle was to head home with Li Qinyao. After getting first place in the beta test, Li Daochong had no choice but to leave through the back door of the shuttle with Li Qinyao. Back at the old house, Li Tianyang had already prepared a table full of dishes to welcome his son back. Li Qinyao had already informed Li Daochong of Li Tianyang's success a day ago. When Li Tianyang found out, he was overjoyed. He was even more excited than when he broke through to the Jin Dan stage. Although he knew that his son was different from the past, he would never have dreamed that Li Daochong would be able to get first place. Li Tianyang was very familiar with the children of the big families on Blue Bay Star. Gu Chao and Okikan were very talented. They could be said to be invincible among the young people on Blue Bay Star. Li Daochong was able to beat the 2 of them. Whether it was luck or tactics, it meant that his son was no longer the silly young master he used to be. In fact, after returning, Li Tianyang didn't ask Li Daochong too much. He knew that his son must have had a fortuitous encounter. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to change so much. Li Daochong's temperament and words were different from before. However, Li Tianyang respected his son's wishes. If he didn't say anything, he wouldn't ask. On the path of cultivation, who didn't have 1 or 2 secrets? Li Tianyang himself also had a fortuitous encounter that no one knew about. Li Tianyang was very open-minded about this. Therefore, he never took the initiative to ask Li Daochong why he had changed so much. As long as his son was happy, it was fine. At night, the family of 3 sat at the dining table in the living room and drank to their heart's content to celebrate Li Daochong getting first place in the beta test. Li Qinyao also drank for the first time. Usually, this little girl didn't drink at all. After a few glasses of wine, she told Li Tianyang everything that had happened on the Ghost Hunter planet. After Li Tianyang heard this, he slammed the table and said, "Son, you should kill that bastard Zhan Honglai. If the sky falls, I'll help you hold it up. Even if my cultivation level has dropped, I can still deal with a mere Zhan family. Over the years, I still have many friends who owe me favors. Some of them have even gone through life and death with me. As long as I say the word, they can destroy the Zhan family at any time." Li Daochong saw Li Tianyang's agitated look and felt a warmth in his heart. He said, "Dad, the Zhan family doesn't need you to do anything. I can deal with such a despicable family. Son, don't worry about the security bureau. I'll contact a comrade of mine and get him to help you." Li Tianyang's eyes revealed a murderous glint. Whoever dared to touch his son would be risking their lives. "Dad, there's no need. You just need to focus all your attention on recovering your cultivation. Don't be distracted. Li Daochong knew his father's personality very well and advised him. Humph, these guys must have eaten a bear's heart and a leopard's gall. Back then, when they saw me, they were like watchdogs. Li Tianyang became more and more agitated as he spoke. Coupled with the fact that he was drinking, he couldn't control himself. Dad, brother, things are different now. The Zhan family can't touch him for the time being. After getting first place in the beta test, even the Federation government will pay more attention to brother. The Zhan family won't dare to touch brother openly, Li Qingyao said. They probably won't dare. However, since Zhan Zhentian didn't care about the past and made a move on Little Chong, it's too late for the Zhan family to stop now. Li Tianyang's face was gloomy. Li Daochong saw that Li Tianyang was furious and looked like he was about to go to the Zhan family to kill them. He hurriedly said, "Dad, you don't have to worry about this. I'll handle it myself. If you insist on interfering, I won't live at home anymore." When Li Tianyang heard this, his expression relaxed and his anger dissipated. As a father, he wasn't afraid of anything but his son. "Little Chong, Dad knows that you don't want to make a big deal out of this. However, the way the Zhan family treated you really makes me angry," Li Tianyang said helplessly. "It's okay, Dad. I'll deal with them. However, it won't be a head-on confrontation. What we need now is to recuperate. You should recover to the Jin Dan stage as soon as possible. Only when you're fully recovered will we have the greatest guarantee," Li Daochong continued. As he spoke, Li Daochong used his telekinesis and a bottle of foundation establishment elixir appeared in his hand. He handed it to Li Tianyang and said, "Dad, this bottle of foundation establishment elixir is for you." Li Tianyang was an unyielding man. When he saw his son give him the foundation establishment elixir without any hesitation, his lower lip trembled and a warm current passed through his heart. He even felt a little sour. "Son, I don't need it. You can keep it for yourself. In at most 3 years, I will definitely be able to rebuild my foundation." "Dad, you can't wait for 3 years. The Zhan family may not be a threat, but sooner or later, your enemies will come looking for you. There's also the Gu family. The grudge between you and the Gu family won't just end like this. This bottle of foundation establishment elixir is most suitable for you. I'm still young and have plenty of time. Maybe in the future there will be even better elixirs waiting for me." Li Daochong saw Li Tianyang didn't want to take it and persuaded him. "Dad, this is Big Brother's kind intentions. You should accept it," Li Qingyao said. Li Tianyang still didn't want to take it. As a father, he had to rely on his son. He couldn't put down his old face. The foundation establishment elixir wasn't an ordinary item. There were very few of them on the market. When breaking through, drinking a bottle of high-purity foundation establishment elixir could increase the success rate of foundation establishment by 20%. This was a very amazing increase. "Dad, if you don't want it, I'll throw it away," Li Daochong said and got up to leave. Chapter 92. Giving the foundation establishment elixir to Li Tianyang was something that Li Daochong had thought of after winning the prize. Making the best use of everything, Li Daochong could keep the foundation establishment elixir for himself, but that was a matter for the future. If he couldn't make use of it, then no matter how good it was just a decoration. Thus, giving the foundation establishment elixir to Li Tianyang would be the best way to make use of it. After more than a month of recuperation, Li Tianyang's spirit root had more or less recovered, and the cracked spirit-building placenta had also gradually healed. Li Tianyang's cultivation had already recovered to the late stage of qi condensation, not far from the peak stage, and foundation establishment was in sight. If he cultivated slowly, his progress would be much slower, but with the foundation establishment elixir, he would be able to reach foundation establishment in at most half a year. Li Daochong had thought that even if he had the hot blood upgrader and cultivated quickly, it would be impossible for him to be faster than his father after his injuries were healed. After all, he was originally a Jin Dan cultivator. Li Tianyang's foundation was solid, but his Jin Dan was broken, and his spirit-building placenta was still there, so he was only recovering now, not cultivating. The speed of recovery was much faster than cultivating, and with the foundation establishment elixir, the recovery time would be further reduced. It was reasonable to give the foundation establishment elixir to his father. Li Daochong had gained a new understanding of the hot blood upgrader while hunting dark ghosts on the ghost hunting planet. After leveling up, the soul power of low-level dark ghosts was too weak to be converted into spirit chi. Simply put, there was no experience to be gained. Li Daochong's current killing of dwarf dark ghosts didn't have much meaning to him. Even if he didn't convert them into spirit chi and instead accumulated them into spirit chi, it wasn't much. Killing a bound spirit only gave him 5 spirit chi. It was pitifully little, and he might as well kill stone-horned cows. The soul power of a dark ghost was extremely limited, while the soul power of a ghost beast was slightly higher. In short, as Li Daochong's cultivation increased, he had to kill higher-level dark ghosts to obtain enough spirit chi. For Li Daochong, dwarf ghosts were no longer meaningful, and the conversion rate of low imps was also decreasing. Only high-level imps would be able to completely transform their soul power. This imperceptibly increased the difficulty for Li Daochong to level up, because the amount of spiritual energy required would increase exponentially. If Li Daochong hadn't been lucky enough to run into 2 green-faced fanged ghosts who didn't know what was good for them, he wouldn't have been able to advance from the 8th layer to the 9th layer of qi refining. Otherwise, Li Daochong might not have reached the 9th level of qi refinement by the end of the test. If Li Daochong hadn't reached the 9th level of qi refining, the outcome of the battle against Zhan Honglai would still be uncertain. As for the battle against Orson, Li Daochong would have definitely been the one to be crushed. The hot-blooded upgrader was not omnipotent. Of course, without the hot-blooded upgrader, there would be no Li Daochong today. Li Daochong wasn't sure how to proceed with his cultivation. If he wanted to increase his cultivation, devouring dark ghosts was the best way. Normally, Li Daochong could cultivate on his own, but the effects were minimal. After 2 months of special training with Chu Qianyue, if it was a student with a profound heaven spirit vein, their strength and cultivation would be increased by a level. However, other than the fact that Li Daochong's physique, spatial perception, and martial arts had improved greatly, there was basically no change in his cultivation base and strength. In other words, if Li Daochong wanted to increase his cultivation, he could only rely on the hot-blooded upgrader. Cultivation methods and secret manuals were useless to him. From this, it could be seen that the hot-blooded upgrader did not increase Li Daochong's talent. It only gave him another cultivation method. Fortunately, after his cultivation increased, it would nourish his physique. After his physique strengthened, it would consolidate his cultivation. The two complemented each other naturally. Whether his talent was good or not was not important to Li Daochong. Under the nourishment of the spirit qi, Li Daochong's 9 ordinary spirit veins were all opened, and they were much thicker than the spirit veins of ordinary cultivators. Although he did not have the 5 elements spirit vein or the profound heaven spirit vein, his spirit veins were 3 times thicker than ordinary spirit veins. The spirit veins were the foundation of cultivation. In the future, if he wanted to build his foundation, he must first cultivate the spirit veins into a spirit root. The 9 spirit veins were connected in a complicated way and extended throughout the body. The 9 spirit veins would form a thick spirit core, which was the spirit root. After the spirit root formed, the spirit-building placenta would be born. Once it formed, he would be in the foundation-building stage. However, foundation building was still a bit far away for Li Daochong. No matter how talented a person was, the fastest time in the history of the Shenghua Federation to reach foundation building from awakening their spirit veins was 5 years. The battle sword Augustine took 7.5 years, but this was already the fastest record on the Indigo Bay star, which was shocking. Foundation building was definitely not an easy task. There were hundreds of millions of cultivators today, but less than 1 in 10,000 of them eventually reached foundation building. One could imagine how difficult it was. Li Daochong did not think that he could sit back and relax just because he had the hot-blooded upgrader. Even if a pie fell from the sky, you still had to catch it. After resting at home for a day, Li Daochong reported to the Tianyuan City Cultivation Safety Bureau. The person who received Li Daochong was a petite female clerk. She greeted him with a smile the entire time, which made Li Daochong very uncomfortable. Li Daochong finally proposed to sue the Federation Cultivation Court, but the female clerk told him that it would be more troublesome to sue and would take a long time. Moreover, more than 10 students from the defendant's side had already come. Their attitude was very good, and they were willing to compensate for all the losses. Due to the special location of the incident, which was not a normal environment, but the Ghost Hunter Star-banished area where the competition for the end-of-term exam was taking place, the other party insisted that they had joined forces to deal with Li Daochong in order to snatch his points. As a result, the nature of the entire incident became very different. It could be said that it did not violate the Federation's cultivation laws, so kidnapping and intentional murder of a cultivator were not established. The female clerk was beautiful and had a good figure. She would intentionally or unintentionally lean against Li Daochong during their conversation. Li Daochong couldn't say that he didn't feel anything at all under these vague circumstances, but he felt a little strange. The Tianyuan City Cultivation Safety Bureau had a very high status on Blue Bay Star. It was equivalent to the highest local law enforcement department. It had a lot of power. Even if it was just a clerk in the Safety Bureau, it still had a very high status. There was no need for this female clerk to be so attentive to a nobody like him. "Mr. Li, let's have lunch together," the female clerk said after looking at the time. "No, I still have things to do. Since there's no way to sue, I'll pay the compensation," Li Daochong refused. "The compensation has been prepared. As long as Mr. Li signs the settlement agreement, the compensation will be immediately transferred to Mr. Li's spiritual internet account," the female clerk replied with a somewhat disappointed expression when she saw that Li Daochong was unwilling. "Oh, then how much is the total compensation?" Li Daochong was a little curious. "A total of 1 million Federation dollars," the female clerk replied. Li Daochong's eyes flickered. He didn't expect it to be so much. However, on second thought, with more than a dozen families sharing the compensation, each family would only pay tens of thousands of Federation dollars. It was nothing to them. If they could solve the problem by spending this little money, why not? However, 1 million was not a small number for Li Daochong. After pondering for a moment, Li Daochong said, "Okay, where's the settlement agreement? I'll sign it now." Li Daochong had long known that there would be no conclusion to this matter. It was already good enough to get a sum of compensation. It was obvious that the families didn't want to spend too much time on this matter. Otherwise, even if they didn't pay the compensation, there would be nothing they could do if they insisted that they wanted to steal Li Daochong's points. The female clerk then took out a piece of silver paper with a faint halo flowing on it. This kind of document was the Security Bureau's special paper for handling cases and was very difficult to destroy. Li Daochong read the contents of the document. It was nothing more than a disclaimer and nonsense about how the two sides reached a settlement. In the end, it was the explanation of the compensation of 1 million Federation dollars. After reading it, Li Daochong pressed his thumbprint on the document. The female clerk then took out a spirit card and handed it to Li Daochong. "Mr. Li, you only need to swipe your wristwatch and the money on this card will be transferred to your account. Other than you, no one else can use this card. Li Daochong took the spirit card and immediately swiped it on his wristwatch. 1,000,000 Federation dollars was transferred to his account immediately. Li Daochong inadvertently smiled. With this money, his father's recovery speed would be further improved. Li Daochong was looking forward to seeing how the Li family would react when his father's cultivation recovered to the peak of the foundation establishment stage. He also wanted to see how the major forces of Blue Bay Star would react. Of course, in addition to helping his father recover, Li Daochong would not neglect his own cultivation. Li Daochong was about to leave after taking the money, but the female clerk secretly held Li Daochong's hand and said, "Mr. Li, my name is Yang Xian. In the future, if you have anything you don't understand about cultivation, you can ask me. Finally, congratulations to Mr. Li for winning first place in the end-of-term test of the 3 Blue Bay Star schools." When Li Daochong heard Yang Xian's words, he finally understood why she was so attentive to him. Most likely, she was optimistic about his future and wanted to leave a good impression on him. "Miss Yang, I will definitely ask for your help in the future," Li Daochong replied simply. He inadvertently pulled his hand out of Yang Xian's hand and got up to leave. After leaving the security bureau, Li Daochong used the spirit void flying steps and was dozens of meters away in the blink of an eye. This move made Yang Xian, who was looking at Li Daochong through the window, look shocked. The first place of the test was indeed worthy of being the first place of the test. Yang Xian, a small clerk, was able to work in the security bureau. Her cultivation level was only at the 8th level of qi refinement. Her father's generation had some connections, but her cultivation level was too low. She could only be a clerk. Otherwise, she could at least be a female cultivator special police officer in a local street office. However, Yang Xian was still unwilling to just be a clerk. She was more active and would not miss out on anyone with a bright future as long as she met them. Even if she could not form a relationship with them, she wanted to leave a good impression. After finishing his business, Li Daochong returned to the old house and immediately took out the 9 splits saber technique and began to study it. The 9 splits saber technique was divided into 5 levels. It was a mid-grade earth-level cultivation method. In a small place like the Blue Bay Star, an earth-level cultivation method was definitely considered a superior cultivation method. Li Daochong had just opened the cultivation method and flipped through a few pages when his mental power contracted and a chill spread from his back. Whoosh! A sharp arrow pierced through the door and whistled. Chapter 93. The silver arrow penetrated the wall of the courtyard, penetrated Li Daochong's bedroom door, and shot towards him. Li Daochong moved in a flash and grabbed the arrow. Poochie, but he couldn't catch it. It penetrated his fist, and the flesh of his palm cracked. With a bang, it shot into Li Daochong's left shoulder. Penetrated. Gurgling, blood spurted out from the bloody hole in the shoulder. Li Daochong's face was dignified, regardless of the injury. The whole person jumped forward and rolled on the ground. If it weren't for Li Daochong's sharp mind power, far stronger than the cultivators of the same level, and always vigilant, he would have sensed the danger at the moment the arrow was shot, and reacted quickly, narrowly avoiding the fatal injury. Otherwise, this arrow would have directly penetrated Li Daochong's heart, instantly killing him. The person who shot this arrow, the cultivation level of the person was far above Li Daochong, at least a cultivator of the qi gathering stage. The penetrating power of the arrow was far beyond imagination. Li Daochong sensed that the other party was at least 1 kilometer away from him. It was a sniper, and his mind power was very strong. He was in a closed room, but the other party could accurately know his position, aim at the vital part, and launch a thunderous attack. It could be seen that the other party was not only strong, but also a veteran. Just as Li Daochong lay down, 2 more silver lights penetrated the alloy door and came whistling, penetrating the wall. Li Daochong converged all the aura in his body, and covered it with his mind power. After 3 arrows, there was no movement outside. Li Daochong was worried that the arrow was poisoned, but after circulating his qi, there was nothing wrong, and his heart was slightly relieved. As long as there was no poison, this injury was nothing, and he still had the power to fight. Li Daochong lay on the ground, tore open his clothes, quickly bandaged his shoulder, took out the Zamadeo and held it in his hand. The basic cultivation method quickly practiced in his mind, and the most essential attack move, the Thunder Strike, was ready to be used. Li Daochong waited quietly. The other party shot 3 arrows in a row, and his aura disappeared immediately. The other party must have thought that he was killed by the arrows. However, there was no certainty in everything just by feeling. Seeing was believing. Since the other party was a veteran, he would definitely lurk to see if he could kill the target. Li Daochong held his breath, and spread his mind power slightly, covering the area within 20 meters of his bedroom. Today, Li Tiang and Li Qingyao went to the Li family to retrieve Xia Yun's memorial tablet. Li Daochong originally also wanted to go, but because he had to report to the Cultivation Security Bureau, he didn't go. Not only did the Li family revoke Li Tianyang's position as the head of the family, but they also demoted him to a servant. The reason was that he neglected his duties. As the head of the family, he didn't put the family's interests above all else. He flaunted his bravery and made a huge mistake. Although he had already made up for his mistakes, he was still stripped of his military position and was forced to retire from the army. The Li family's reason seemed unreasonable, but it was also reasonable. After being demoted to a servant, Li Tianyang's dual cultivation partner, Xia Yun's memorial tablet, could no longer be placed in the Li family's ancestral hall. It had to be moved out and placed in the public ancestral hall. Li Tianyang naturally didn't allow this, and wanted to move his wife's memorial tablet to his own residence. Li Tianyang hadn't left the old house since he returned. He had been recuperating, and today was the first time he went out. Li Daochong had just returned home, and an assassin had appeared. This kind of thing couldn't be explained by coincidence. Li Daochong, who was lying on the ground, smiled slightly. He didn't know why, but at this moment, he wasn't afraid at all. Instead, he was a little excited. The spiritual energy in his body was restless. A few minutes passed, but there was no abnormal movement outside the house. Li Daochong's mind power didn't sense any fluctuations. Li Daochong was a little puzzled. Did the other party leave after shooting 3 arrows? Li Daochong was still lying on the ground, motionless. His eyes were fixed on the door, and his whole body was tense, ready to launch a thunderous attack at any time. Li Daochong still had 2 talismans in his hand, ready to be used at any time. These 2 talismans were the highest achievements Li Daochong had made in the past month. 2 strengthened level 3 ice talismans, whose power could reach the level of an ordinary level 4 ice talisman. They were originally Li Daochong's trump card on the ghost hunting planet, but after he successfully advanced to the 9th tier of the Qi refining realm, there was no need to use them. A few more minutes passed, but there was still no movement. Li Daochong's brows showed a trace of doubt. At this moment, an extremely slight fluctuation came from his mind power. If Li Daochong hadn't been paying full attention, he would have thought this fluctuation was just a small bug flying outside the house. But now, this slight fluctuation made every pore on Li Daochong's body stand on end. It wasn't fear, but excitement. In the face of a powerful opponent, the excitement of wanting to give the other party a surprise. It was like hiding in a place where no one could find you when playing hide and seek, but your heart was surging with excitement and you couldn't hold it in. Your whole body was trembling slightly, and your heart was beating faster. Of course, Li Daochong wasn't blind. If it weren't for the 2 strengthened level 3 ice talismans in his hand, he would have slipped away from the back door. After the slight fluctuation disappeared, a shadow flashed across the gap under the door. After a while, it calmed down and the door lock moved silently. Click, the door was open. Creak, the door opened, but there was no one. A few seconds later, a head flashed and shrank back. But when it saw a person lying on the ground, it stretched out again. Then, a short figure in ordinary Taoist robes flashed in. Almost at the same time, Li Daochong had already cast an ice talisman in his hand. The best time was the moment the other party appeared. The best time to launch a sneak attack was to catch the other party off guard. If he missed it, there wouldn't be a second chance. Li Daochong had already made all the preparations. He had been waiting for this moment, but he couldn't tell the other party's cultivation level. But he was sure that the other party wasn't at the foundation establishment stage or the peak of the Qi gathering stage, because the other party hadn't completely concealed his aura and whereabouts in front of him. In fact, after that arrow, Li Daochong had a rough idea of the other party's cultivation level. It should be between the early stage and mid-stage of the Qi gathering. After being hit by the arrow, Li Daochong instantly spread out his telekinesis and searched the surrounding 300 meters. There was no one else. After the Federation's cultivation method was introduced, the assassin industry had gradually declined. Murder was illegal, and killing a cultivator was an additional crime. The Cultivation Security Bureau wasn't to be trifled with. If caught killing a cultivator, they would be severely punished. After being convicted, they would be directly teleported to 13 Specter at the border of the Hades and left to fend for themselves. 13 Specter was the border planet where dark ghosts entered the Federation. Dark ghosts wreaked havoc and ghosts were everywhere. Once they reached the Nether Devil Star, they would enter the gates of hell. There, dying was much easier than living. The price to pay for killing an innocent cultivator was unbearable. Even desperados had to weigh the pros and cons. Therefore, in this era, there weren't many people who dared to be assassins. No one would take the risk unless they had nowhere else to go. Hiring an assassin was extremely expensive. Apart from the issue of price, hiring too many assassins would also make the employer unsafe. After confirming that the other party was only one person, and that it was a sniper, Li Daochong decided to ambush the other party. Although it was still a little risky, Li Daochong had his own confidence. In addition to the 2 ice talismans, he also had a level 3 strengthened golden bell talisman and a level 3 fire talisman. In addition, Li Daochong's own strength was close to that of an ordinary cultivator at the peak of the Qi gathering stage. Li Daochong could still fight a sniper at close range in the early stage of the Qi gathering. If he was dealing with a close-range cultivator, he would probably have to run away. The ice talisman was as fast as lightning. The distance of a few meters was negligible. Luya was already very careful. When he was close to the target, he kept his telekinesis locked onto the other party. After repeatedly confirming that there was no aura, he lurked and intentionally waited for a while. He also used a secret technique to open the door. Only when he saw the corpse lying on the ground did he let his guard down. However, as soon as he entered the room, the corpse lying on the ground suddenly swung its arm. With a boom, a blast of cold air blasted toward him. Lu Ya's reaction was extremely fast, but he was still hit by the ice talisman. His body immediately stiffened. Li Daochong leaped up like a cheetah. He gripped his Zamadeo tightly with both hands and fiercely slashed at the attacker. He used all his strength to launch a thunderous attack. In the world of martial arts, only speed was unbeatable. The ultimate essence of a basic technique was to use the most tricky and logical angle to launch the fastest attack. Whoosh! At the same time that Lu Ya's body stiffened, a silver light flashed and the blade pierced through the air. The spirit energy in Lu Ya's body exploded. He ignored the internal injuries and raised the crossbow in his hand to block. Clang! A crisp sound rang out. Lu Ya flew backward and crashed into the wall with a loud thud. Li Daochong also flew backwards. Everything behind him was smashed into pieces. His back hit the wall. The qi and blood in his body churned, and a mouthful of blood rushed to his throat. Is this the strength of a chi-gathering cultivator? Li Daochong was shocked. The opponent was hit by the ice talisman, and frost had already formed all over his body. Unexpectedly, he did not lose the ability to move and blocked his full strength attack, causing him to suffer internal injuries. Luya only felt dizzy. He had already suffered internal injuries. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He was complaining in his heart. Is this a freaking chi-gathering cultivator? How is this possible? Not only did his sniping miss, but the opponent was also able to completely hide his breath and not expose it at all. He had been pretending to be dead, waiting for him to take the bait. Not to mention that he had a level 4 ice talisman in his hand. Even if he had not been ambushed, it would have been very difficult for him to block that attack. He was deceived by his employer. The moment Luya fell to the ground, he ignored his internal injuries and raised the crossbow in his hand to shoot. But before he could shoot, another ice talisman shot out and froze the crossbow in his hand. What? Luya was shocked. Before he could react, Li Daochong had already appeared in front of him. Puff! Li Daochong spat out a mouthful of blood and sprayed it on Luya's face. His vision suddenly blurred. Luya used his telekinesis to sense, tilted his head and kicked out. Almost at the same time, the sound of the blade cutting into the bone was heard. Luya felt a chill on his shoulder, followed by a sharp pain. Pring! Li Daochong was also sent flying by the kick. Clang! The Zamadeo in his hand flew out and smashed into the wall. Look at the talisman! Li Daochong shouted as he flew out. Luya's heart was shocked. He desperately ran out of the door. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared. Only a few drops of blood were left on the ground. Li Daochong fell to the corner of the wall. His whole body was broken. Seeing that his opponent had escaped, he breathed a sigh of relief. At this time, he did not have any strength left. Only now did Li Daochong truly understand the strength of a chi-gathering cultivator. Li Daochong used his telekinesis to take out the Golden Bell Talisman and the Fire Talisman. If his opponent came back, the two talismans in his hand would be his last struggle. Before Li Daochong could catch his breath, a sharp arrow pierced through the air with a swoosh. Fuck you! Li Daochong cursed in his heart. Chapter 94. Li Daochong took out two talismans at the same time. The Fire Talisman shot straight at the whistling arrow, while the Golden Bell Talisman wrapped Li Daochong in a faint halo. Li Daochong's whole body fell apart and he couldn't move. He could only watch the arrow penetrate the Fire Talisman and shoot toward him. The arrow was aimed at Li Daochong's glabella. Just when Li Daochong thought he was going to be killed, a beautiful figure shot toward him like lightning. Bang! A white jade hand appeared in front of Li Daochong, less than 10 centimeters away from the tip of his nose. The slender fingers firmly clamped the arrow. In Li Daochong's eyes, the arrow with infinite power was like paper. The two delicate jade fingers gently clamped it. With a crack, the front part of the arrow was broken into two pieces. Li Daochong looked at the owner of the jade hand and grinned. Blood gushed out of his mouth and he murmured a few words. Thank you. Chu! His head tilted and he fainted. Chu Qianyue's cold face showed a hint of nervousness. She quickly grabbed Li Daochong's wrist and checked it. After confirming that there was no injury, her expression eased. Chu Qianyue took out a bottle of strong recovery liquid and poured it into Li Daochong's mouth. Then her figure flashed and disappeared. A few minutes later, Chu Qianyue reappeared in front of Li Daochong with a body in her hand. It was Luya's. After the killer Luya shot the arrow, he was swallowed by a powerful cold air and died instantly. His career as a killer was over. When Luya contacted his employer, he never thought that assassinating a novice refinement stage cultivator would cost him his life. Chu Qianyue had been worried about Li Daochong since he had offended so many clans during the major examination. Some of the clans were very ruthless, and many people who had offended them ended up very miserable. Some of them even disappeared without a trace. On the surface, Chu Qianyue's attitude toward Li Daochong was cold. In fact, she had high expectations for him and wanted to leave something behind before she left. This time, it was hard to say whether she could come back. Even if everything went well, it would be many years later. Chu Qianyue was somewhat reluctant to leave this world, and it was more likely that she would never come back. Qian Chonghai had given her that thing. There were some things she had to do. Looking at the unconscious Li Daochong, Chu Qianyue sighed and reached out to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth. "Brat, I'll help you one last time. You can only rely on yourself from now on." Li Daochong felt a warm current flowing through his body, making him feel very comfortable. He slowly opened his eyes, and what he saw was a peerlessly beautiful face. "Teacher Chu," Li Daochong called out subconsciously. Chu Qianyue didn't expect that Li Daochong would wake up so soon. She had just infused qi into his body to heal his injuries when he opened his eyes. Because they were very close to each other, Chu Qianyue's face turned red, and she almost suffered internal injuries. "Shut up, close your eyes and cooperate with me," Chu Qianyue said coldly. "Oh." Li Daochong answered in confusion and then closed his eyes. But at this moment, his heart beat faster and he felt a rush of excitement. Li Daochong had never seen Chu Qianyue at such a close distance. Her face was unbelievably exquisite. She was nothing more than a fairy. The only pity was that her face was always in a cold state and refused to let anyone get close to her. Half an hour later, Li Daochong's face became ruddy. His broken bones were quickly healed under the dual nourishment of the recovery elixir and spiritual qi. Chu Qianyue transferred a lot of spiritual qi to Li Daochong, giving him the greatest support. Li Daochong's previous state of collapse was completely gone. His bones were indescribably comfortable. Another 10 minutes passed. Chu Qianyue withdrew her jade-like hands from Li Daochong's chest. Her stunning face was dripping with fragrant sweat. Even though she had the cultivation of foundation establishment, she still felt a little tired after injecting qi into Li Daochong's body to heal him regardless of the cost. Li Daochong took a deep breath and was about to get up. But just as he stood up, his body froze. His shoulders instantly became numb, and then it spread all over his body. Plop! Falling to the ground, Li Daochong stared at the ceiling. He couldn't blink, couldn't breathe, and couldn't control his body. He seemed to be controlled by some mysterious force. His whole body was stiff and he couldn't move. Li Daochong opened his mouth and tried to take a deep breath, but he couldn't do it. Chu Qianyue, who had just closed her eyes to adjust her breath, suddenly opened her eyes. She touched Li Daochong's forehead, pinched his arm, and finally felt his pulse. Chu Qianyue was shocked. She cried out in anger, "Gui tua castor grass, so vicious." Li Daochong's whole body didn't move, but his hearing was still there. Hearing Chu Qianyue's voice, he gasped. The liquid of Gui tua castor grass had a strong nerve and muscle paralysis effect. Without the Jin Dan realm, it was impossible to resist this paralysis effect. This liquid itself was not toxic, colorless, and tasteless. After entering the human body, it reacted with the blood and paralyzed the nerves and muscles. The incubation period was 1 hour. The paralysis effect itself didn't harm the body. It was just that the body couldn't move and the whole body's muscles would be in a stiff state. No matter how deep the poison was, it would disappear 1 hour after the attack. There were no side effects, but 1 hour of paralysis of the whole body's muscles and nerves was enough to kill a person. Could one live after an hour of cardiac arrest? Could one live without breathing for 10 minutes? Unless one reached the Jin Dan realm, one could use Jin Dan to provide energy to the body. Even if the heart stopped beating and couldn't breathe, one could survive for several days. But below the Jin Dan realm, as long as the blood was contaminated with the liquid of Gui tua castor grass, if there was no treatment, the person would undoubtedly die. Li Daochong was conscious at this time, but he couldn't feel his body. His heartbeat was getting slower and slower, and it was difficult for him to breathe. He could only exhale but not inhale. Li Daochong desperately ran the Reiki in his body, but he could only maintain it for a little while. His consciousness was becoming blurred little by little. Chu Qianyue's cold and beautiful face hesitated for a moment. She put one hand on Li Daochong's heart and pressed down. At the same time, she lowered her head and opened her small mouth to kiss Li Daochong's mouth. To be precise, it was not a kiss, but artificial respiration. Li Daochong's eyes widened. Blinking was an impossible task for him. The concentration of the Guetua castor grass in Li Daochong's blood was very high. After it took effect, the paralysis effect was very fast. In just dozens of seconds, he lost all ability to move. If Li Daochong didn't take measures to save him in time, he would die in a few minutes. The body of a refinement stage cultivator was still too weak. After all, it was still a mortal body. Eating, drinking, sleeping, and breathing were all essential. Chu Qianyue was in a hurry and didn't have a better way. The only thing she could think of was to breathe into Li Daochong's mouth with her mouth and use her Reiki to squeeze his heart to make it beat. Li Daochong never dreamed that one day he would be lying on his back on the ground, in a conscious state, being kissed by a peerless beauty using artificial respiration. His first kiss was gone just like that? Although Li Daochong couldn't feel his lips at this time, such an intimate act still made his mind run wild. His heart, which was gradually stopping beating, seemed to have a slight reaction under this stimulation. But this was just Li Daochong's illusion. In addition to his consciousness, the paralysis of his body was intensifying. Slap. After blowing several times, Chu Qianyue saw the strange look in Li Daochong's eyes and his face was slightly red in the paralysis state. She was a little annoyed and slapped Li Daochong. "Brat, close your eyes," Li Daochong complained in his heart. He wanted to close his eyes, but he had to be able to. Li Daochong tried his best to make an innocent sound. Slap. Another slap on the face. Li Daochong felt so wronged. Fortunately, he didn't feel any pain in the paralysis state. Of course, Chu Qianyue knew that Li Daochong couldn't do anything now, including closing his eyes. Slapping Li Daochong twice was just to cover up her shyness and annoyance. Chu Qianyue's beautiful face was already red. After slapping Li Daochong twice, she wiped Li Daochong's eyes with her glittering and translucent hands, and finally closed his eyes that made her feel so embarrassed. Chu Qianyue had been cultivating for more than 70 years since she was born, but she had never done such an intimate act with any man. She didn't know why she made such a bold move when she saw Li Daochong's breathing was not smooth. Chu Qianyue was a little surprised that she was reluctant to let this brat go. Her desire to not let him die was very strong. Was it because he was very much like her? Or was it because of his performance in the special training and what he said to her? Chu Qianyue herself didn't understand why she was so nervous about this brat's life. She had been in the human world for decades. Except for Qian Chonghai, Chu Qianyue didn't have any kind of affection for anyone. She only had a strange kind of friendship with Qian Chonghai and a master-disciple relationship with him. But Li Daochong gave Chu Qianyue a different feeling. This brat had only been in contact with her for 2 months, but Chu Qianyue felt a kind of intimacy that she had never felt before. Especially on the last day of the special training, the words that Li Daochong said to her moved Chu Qianyue, who had no other thoughts in her mind. After Li Daochong closed his eyes, he had no other feedback to the outside world except for his hearing and mind sense. Even if he knew that Chu Qianyue was giving him artificial respiration, he couldn't feel it. His consciousness gradually became sleepy in the paralysis. After a long time in a daze, Li Daochong's body gradually regained consciousness. The first thing he felt was the warmth and softness on his lips. Li Daochong subconsciously moved his lip. Slap. Then a slap came up and hit Li Daochong's face. This time he felt it. It was burning. Li Daochong opened his eyes. His eyes emitted an innocent light. He really didn't mean it. Humph, brat, how dare you take advantage of me? Chu Qianyue snorted and stood up from the ground. Li Daochong struggled to sit up and said apologetically, Miss Chu, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. Shut up. Don't say it again. Just pretend it never happened, Chu Qianyue said with a cold face. Then she waved her hand and a flame flew out from her palm and fell on the killer not far away. In just a few seconds, the killer's body was burned to ashes. Nothing was left, not even black ashes. Genuine fire? Li Daochong was shocked. He knew that Chu Qianyue was very strong, but he didn't expect her to be strong enough to condense a genuine fire. Chapter 95. Li Daochong was shocked when Chu Qianyue burned the corpse with true fire. True fire was a pure yang object that could restrain all low-level dark ghosts. Someone wants to kill you. If you don't want to die, then cultivate as hard as you can. Only when your strength is strong enough can your enemies shrink back and not dare to provoke you. I can only help you this much. Tomorrow I will leave Indigo Bay Star. After Chu Qianyue dealt with the corpse, the look on her beautiful face returned to the cold look of the past. When will you come back? Li Daochong struggled to stand up and asked while scratching his head. I don't know. Chu Qianyue replied coldly. Where are you going? I'll visit you when I'm free. Li Daochong asked. It's useless to tell you. You can't go there. Don't ask any more. If I can come back, I'll inform Old Man Qian in advance. If you're still in Blue Bay Star, he'll inform you. Take this manual and practice it well. Even if you can't build your foundation in the future, you'll be able to fight with a foundation-building cultivator if you master this manual. Chu Qianyue said as a yellow ancient book appeared in her hand. Although the secret manual was shabby, it gave people a sense of antiquity and weight. On the cover of the book, there were 4 big words, Taishu swordsmanship. Li Daochong took the secret manual and his eyes lit up. This secret manual was actually a heaven-class manual, which was much more powerful than the 9-splits saber technique that he had just obtained. Brat, don't be happy too early. Don't practice it before you reach the chi-gathering stage. Otherwise, your body won't be able to bear it and will hurt your foundation. Start practicing after you reach the chi-gathering stage. If there's anything you don't understand, you can ask Old Man Qian. This secret manual was given to me by him. Chu Qianyue continued. Chu Qianyue gave it directly, but Li Daochong felt it was heavy in his hand. Heaven-class manuals were rare even in the whole Federation, let alone in Blue Bay Star. The value of a heaven-class manual was immeasurable. Federation coins could no longer be used to buy it. It would cost at least millions of spirit stones. Teacher Chu, do you have to go? Li Daochong didn't know why he was reluctant to leave. Yes. Chu Qianyue responded and looked outside the door. After a moment of silence, she said, It's getting late. I have to go. Why don't you leave after dinner? We, master and disciple, have not had a proper meal together yet. Li Daochong urged him to stay. No. Oh, that's right, I heard from Old Qian that Blue Bay Star's talent has withered in recent years, so the Federation has greatly reduced the number of Blue Bay Star students who can participate in the joint entrance examination of 100 schools. Originally, the top 30 students in the grand test would automatically qualify for the joint entrance examination of 100 schools, but this time, there are only 15 spots. Your end-of-term grand test ranking won't be the final result. Old Qian said that Blue Bay Star's Department of Education has decided to hold the first Blue Bay Star New Star competition, and the top 15 students will qualify for the joint entrance examination of 100 schools. After refusing, Chu Qianyue told Li Daochong this news, which hadn't been made public yet. Rising Star competition? Li Daochong's eyebrows revealed a hint of surprise, but in his heart, he scoffed at the sudden reform. He always felt that there were other reasons behind the reform. He could smell a hint of disbelief in his counterattack to win first place in the grand test this time. He was afraid that many people still didn't believe that he had won first place in the grand test this time. On the ghost hunting star, Li Daochong hadn't encountered any real strong opponents other than Orson. Although Zhan Honglai was strong, he was only around the top 20 on the Blue Bay star. Anyone ranked above him could almost beat him to a pulp in one move. His fight with Orson had started without an end. So many people probably thought that he had retreated without a fight because he was afraid. In short, most people thought that he had won first place by luck. Li Daochong thought it was funny. This bunch of snobs really knew how to have fun. They actually held a new star competition. Are there any requirements for participating in the new star competition? Li Daochong asked seriously. Yes, 8th level of qi refining, above 16 years old and below 20 years old, Chu Qianyue replied indifferently. Li Daochong was stunned for a moment. 8th level of qi refining, below 20 years old? Didn't that mean that many sophomores could participate as well? Well, that's it. Before Li Daochong could react, Chu Qianyue's beautiful figure had already disappeared. The speed of a foundation establishment cultivator was not something that Li Daochong could catch. Chu Qianyue's departure made Li Daochong feel empty in his heart. He even felt a little insecure. Not long after Chu Qianyue left, Li Tianyang and Li Qingyao came back from the Li family with Xia Yun's memorial tablet. Li Daochong told them what happened in the afternoon. Li Tianyang went berserk on the spot. If not for Li Daochong and Li Qingyao desperately holding him back, Li Tianyang would have definitely exterminated the Zhan family. After more than a month of recuperation, and with the support of Li Daochong's powerful recovery liquid, Li Tianyang's cultivation had already recovered to the late stage of qi gathering. Li Tianyang's late stage of qi gathering was different from ordinary cultivators. After all, he used to be a cultivator of Jin Dan. With his magical power and foundation, the late stage of qi gathering was equivalent to an early stage foundation establishment cultivator. Coupled with his trump card, even a middle stage foundation establishment cultivator may not be able to defeat Li Tianyang. Now that Li Tianyang really killed the Jin family, he could really exterminate the Zhan family. However, the outside world did not know that Li Tianyang's cultivation had recovered. They all thought that he would not live for long, and that his cultivation would drop a little every day, and would definitely not exceed the 7th stage of qi refining. This time, Li Tianyang and Li Qingyao went to the Li family to get Xia Yun's memorial tablet. It could be said that they were met with cold eyes. Not a single high-level member of the Li family appeared. Only a few family guards received them, and their attitude was very bad. Dad, the assassin should have known that you were not here. The Li family may have leaked the news that you went back to get the memorial tablet to the family that wants to deal with me. Li Daochong saw that Li Tianyang's anger had somewhat calmed down and said. Li Tianyang did not speak, but his face was ashen. He did not want to believe that the Li family would really play tricks behind his back, but now he had to accept the reality. Li Tianyang was silent for a while, then said, Son, I will be in seclusion for a period of time, no more than 2 months. During this time, you and Qingyao should be more careful. Li Daochong nodded. Dad, don't worry about your seclusion. I will set up a spirit array near the old mansion. Li Tianyang's eyes shone. Son, you must be very careful while I am in seclusion. After saying that, Li Tianyang entered the basement of the old mansion. During this time, Yin Ping had been busy renovating the old mansion and opening up all the places that could be used. The basement of the old mansion was originally used to store items, but Yin Ping had transformed it into a lounge. Yin Ping used the money that Li Daochong had given her to invite the neighbors of the slums to work together to strengthen and renovate the old mansion. The old mansion now was completely different from when they had just moved in. Over the next few days, Li Daochong spent all his time making spirit talismans and spirit arrays, and 3 of his spiritual brains were broken. For the past 5 days, he hadn't slept a wink. Together with Li Qingyao and Yinping, he had set up 3 spiritual arrays, 2 defensive and 1 offensive. Li Daochong did not have a deep understanding of spirit arrays. He relied on reading books and spiritual brains to set up 3 level 2 spirit arrays. The level of the spirit arrays was not high, and their power was not great, but the sensitivity of the defensive spirit arrays was very high. As long as it was not a foundation establishment cultivator, it was almost impossible for anyone below the foundation establishment stage to quietly approach the old mansion. Li Daochong was not good at setting up spirit arrays, but making spirit talismans was his strength. In 5 days, he made 12 spirit talismans, 6 ice talismans and 6 fire talismans, all of which were level 3 strengthened versions. Li Daochong had already touched the threshold of making level 4 spirit talismans. If his cultivation could be further improved and the strength of his telekinesis increased, level 4 spirit talismans would be easy to make. Of the 12 spirit talismans, Li Daochong only kept 2 for himself. Li Qingyao and Yinping each took 5 of the remaining 10 for self-defense. The appearance of the assassin made Li Daochong raise his guard 120%. After doing all this, Li Daochong slept for a whole day and made up for it. After waking up, he ate a full meal and immediately went to his cultivation room to study the 9-split saber technique. Li Daochong flipped open the 9-split saber technique and was about to start cultivating from the first level when suddenly, a sound rang in his mind. Picked up a cultivation technique, 9-split saber technique. Do you want to learn 9-split saber technique? Hearing the prompt, Li Daochong almost jumped onto the roof. The hot-blooded level-up device had such a function? Li Daochong had only picked up 1 page of the 9-split saber technique. It was very similar to the situation in the game. He could pick up a cultivation technique and cultivate it. Li Daochong was stunned for a moment and then chose yes. In an instant, the power in Li Daochong's body was instantly sucked dry. His body softened and fell to the ground. All kinds of images kept appearing in his mind. Some kind of ideology was copied into Li Daochong's memory. In just 1 or 2 seconds, Li Daochong had a very deep understanding of the 9-split saber technique. It was as if he had gone through several years of cultivation, but all of this was condensed into an instant. The spirit energy in Li Daochong's body also disappeared in an instant. Pooh! Li Daochong spat out a mouthful of blood. His vision turned black and he lost consciousness. When Li Daochong woke up, it was already nighttime. His whole body was sore and his head felt heavy as if it was filled with lead. His temples were throbbing, and he felt extremely uncomfortable. Li Daochong had a similar feeling before, which was produced when he was cultivating the basic cultivation method and the psychokinesis attack. Although those 2 times were uncomfortable, it was still within the range of tolerance. This time, Li Daochong felt like he was going to die. The 9-split saber technique was obviously much more powerful than the 2 basic cultivation technique. With the hot-blooded level-up device, the cultivation technique could be completed in an instant. However, the side effects would increase with the strength of the technique. Li Daochong felt guilty. Fortunately, his psychokinesis was strong. Otherwise, he would have lost his life because of excessive exhaustion. It seemed that he had to be careful when cultivating techniques in the future. If he was not careful, he would dig a hole and bury himself. Li Daochong was secretly glad that he did not read the Great Void Sword technique. If he did, his body would probably be cold by now. Li Daochong raised his wristwatch with difficulty and sent a message to Silver Bottle. Soon, the door of the cultivation room was pushed open. Silver Bottle hurried in and saw Li Daochong's pale face and mouth full of blood. She was so anxious that she was about to cry. After a while, Li Qingyao also ran in. The 2 women worked together to carry Li Daochong into the bedroom. Li Qingyao hurriedly found a spiritual liquid vat and poured all the strong recovery spiritual liquid in the house into it. Li Daochong lay in the strong recovery spiritual liquid. In just a few seconds, the spiritual liquid in the vat decreased at a speed visible to the naked eye. Chapter 96. Lying in the vat, Li Daochong's body emitted white mist. He felt a little better after all the spirit liquid in the vat disappeared, but it still wasn't enough, so he took out some spirit recovery fluid and drank it. Black liquid flowed out of Li Daochong's body, and soon the whole vat was turbid. The severe pain in his head subsided a little, and his body also regained some strength. Li Daochong took a bath with difficulty and fell into a deep sleep on the bed. Half a month passed in this sleep. While Li Daochong was asleep, the Qiao sisters, Lu Ming and Yi Feiyue, came to visit him. The old residence became very lively, but Li Tianyang and Li Daochong, father and son, one was in seclusion and the other was in a deep sleep, so they couldn't receive visitors. Li Qingyao and Yinping were both badly battered. The two women said that Li Daochong was out traveling and would be back soon. Yinping and Qingyao didn't know how Li Daochong was injured, but they guessed that Li Daochong might have suffered from qi deviation during cultivation, resulting in serious internal injuries. The two women didn't know when Li Daochong would wake up. Apart from being in a deep sleep, Li Daochong's physical indicators were normal. His heartbeat was strong and vigorous, and the spiritual aura on his body was boundless and heavy. When Qingyao approached Li Daochong, who was in a deep sleep, she felt a very clear sense of oppression. It was the reverence that a low-level cultivator would naturally feel when facing a high-level cultivator. Qingyao didn't know what had happened to Li Daochong, but she had a faint feeling that he would be different when he woke up. Yinping had been worried while Li Daochong was in a deep sleep. The smile on her little face had disappeared, and she would massage Li Daochong's body every day to prevent stiffness. Yesterday, even Xian Tsang University's Cultivation School's Vice Dean, Qian Changhai, had come to call Li Daochong back to the school to register. The schedule for the Rising Star competition had been set, and it would begin in 2 months. Although there was still some time before the official start, the registration had already reached the final stage. If one did not register, they would not be able to participate. Qian Changhai waited for a long time, but there was no sign of Li Daochong. At first, he didn't care, but when there were only 3 days left to the registration, the old man couldn't sit still anymore. Ever since Li Daochong returned to Blue Bay Star, there had been no news of him. Chu Qianyue had left without a word. Qian Changhai arrived at Li Daochong's residence. He didn't expect that the young master of the Li family would actually live in the slums. But when Qian Changhai came to the old house, he sighed. There was actually such a paradise in the slums. This kind of old-fashioned house-style residence was very much to Qian Changhai's liking. It was very suitable for retirement in seclusion. The old house wasn't small. There were more than a dozen rooms, 2 courtyards, birds chirping and flowers fragrant, rockery pavilions, small bridges and flowing water. It had a unique flavor. The one who received Qian Changhai was Yinping. The old man's eyes lit up when he saw the little girl. After learning her age, he looked regretful. There was a girl next door who hadn't grown up yet. No matter how old Qian Changhai was, it was inconvenient for him to make a move. If Chu Qianyue knew about Qian Changhai's dirty thoughts, she would definitely go berserk on the spot. She would take out the best hammer in the world and smash the old man into the ground. Qian Changhai naturally didn't see Li Daochong, but at least he had news of this kid. He had actually gone on a trip. Qian Changhai thought that it made sense. In previous years, there would be a 2-month holiday after the end of the big test. Going on a trip would also be helpful for cultivation. Most students would choose to go on a trip during this period. After drinking a cup of tea, Qian Changhai said goodbye. But when he left, old man Qian's eyes swept across a room in the depths of the old house. He sensed a weak, but unusually pure spiritual energy fluctuation there. Old Man Qian's old face smiled slightly and turned to leave. No matter why Li Daochong had disappeared, Qian Chonghai decided to use his position to help Li Daochong register first. A month later, in a courtyard of the Zhan family located at the other end of Blue Bay Star in Bay Sea City, Zhan Honglia's whole body was wrapped in gauze and soaked in a huge jar filled with green liquid. His body emitted a faint red glow. His aura had already reached the 10th layer of qi refinement. Zhan Zhentian stood in front of the jar with a rare trace of satisfaction in his dignified eyes. The competition would begin in a month and a half. At that time, his son's cultivation should be able to reach the 11th layer of qi refinement. His sea collapse technique would reach another level, and his chances of entering the top 15 would greatly increase. The Zhan family had been standing in Tianyuan City for hundreds of years. It was only in his generation that they started to improve a little, and Zhan Honglia's talent was even above his father's. He was the hope of the Zhan family becoming one of the great families in the future. "Father, someone is coming. Aren't you going to go out and receive them?" Zhan Honglai stood in the jar and said with his eyes closed. "Don't worry. There's no harm in letting them wait." Zhan Zhentian said in a deep voice. "Those guys are hiding in the back and letting our Zhan family rush to the front." The assassins left and didn't return. They didn't dare to show their faces for a month and a half. They only came to visit after confirming that Li Daochong might be dead. They are even more careful than street rats. Do they really think our Zhan family is cannon fodder? Zhan Honglai frowned. Wealth comes from danger. If they didn't give me so many benefits, why would I agree to come forward? Without their filial piety, how could I refine this jar of spirit-gathering liquid? Zhan Zhentian's face revealed a sinister smile. "Father, aren't you afraid that the matter of the assassins will be exposed?" "Of course I am. But even if it's exposed, those old foxes won't be able to escape. From the moment of the conspiracy, everyone is on the same boat. No one can escape unscathed, including the Li family." Zhan Zhentian said fearlessly. "Is Li Daochong really dead?" After Zhan Honglai came back from the big test, he was locked in the Zhan family's secret cultivation room by his father to reflect on his mistake. After a few days, he began to cultivate, so he wasn't clear about the whole incident. The Dark Knight Alliance will issue a warrant for arrest if they don't succeed. The White Dao Security Bureau, the Dark Knight Alliance, and the Assassin Circle have their own rules. Li Daochong should be dead. I have arranged an informant to keep a lookout in the West District. In the Li family's abandoned old house, except for Li Qingyao and the card slave, even Li Tianyang is quiet. I think his son is dead, and Li Tianyang is injured in a fit of anger. He won't live long. Zhan Zhentian sneered. Being able to remove the thorn in his heart, Zhan Zhentian would wake up laughing in his sleep these days. Zhan Honglia's eyes were still closed, but the corner of his mouth moved slightly. The news of Li Daochong's death made him very happy, but he was a little regretful that he didn't kill Li Daochong with his own hands. Zhan Zhentian waited for a while before leaving the secret cultivation room and coming to the courtyard hall. Li Tianqing and the other elders of the family had been waiting in the hall for a long time. "Manager Li, elders, sorry for the long wait. Honglai encountered some problems in his cultivation, so I was giving him some guidance. Please forgive me for not coming out to meet you." Zhan Zhentian immediately apologized with a smile as soon as he appeared. "Brother Zhan, is there any news recently?" Li Tianqing asked cautiously. The other elders of the family looked at Zhan Zhentian. "Don't worry, everyone. I always do things cleanly and won't leave any traces. The assassin has already left the Blue Bay Star. Li Daochong will definitely die this time. Even if we report it, there won't be any result." Zhan Zhentian smiled and replied confidently. "We trust Brother Zhan. Recently, many people have gone to visit Li Daochong, but they haven't seen him. Even Li Tianyang hasn't shown up. I think the father and son are most likely on the road to hell together." a family elder said with a smile. There were descendants of the family who knew Ouyang Qian and the other women, and they learned this news from chatting. Haha, congratulations to Manager Li for pulling out the thorn in your heart. From now on, the Li family can go on the right path. You don't have to worry about people being obstinate and opinionated anymore. Another family elder laughed. In the future, I still need your support to make the Li family's business bigger and stronger. Li Tianxing said politely, trying to hide his joy. Manager Li, can the mine in Rising Sun City be handed over to our family for mining? The family elder immediately tried to build a relationship. Since Old Chen asked, we will naturally give it to you. How about a 20% discount? Li Tianxing was worried about not having enough money to spend. How about a 30% discount? My family will gift the property rights of Green Street in the Eastern District to Manager Li? Li Tianxing's eyes narrowed and he was overjoyed. No matter how he looked at the elder, he found him pleasing to the eye. Doing business with smart people really saved time and effort. Green Street was a famous bar street in Tianyuan City, and it had always been the property of the Liang family. Compared to the mine, real estate wasn't as profitable as the mine, but it was expensive because there were many beautiful women. Who knew how many families were jealous of the Liang family for not spending a single cent? Li Tianxing and the Liang family elder took the lead, and the other family elders and Zhan Jintian also began to discuss cooperation. The Zhan family's courtyard became the scene of a trade fair. Nearly 10 families came and went, each taking what they needed. Of course, they were all using the name of their family to put money in their pockets. In the Li family's old residence, Li Daochong lay quietly on his bed in his bedroom. Except for the occasional slight frown, he didn't move at all. He had been like this for a month and a half. Yin Ping sat by the bed, sobbing softly. She whispered, "Young master, you can't die." Li Daochong had already regained consciousness, but the spirit qi in his body was in a very strange state. The 9 spirit veins were slowly fusing together. The spirit qi was getting purer and denser, and the spirit veins were starting to take shape. Li Daochong's consciousness was in a wandering state. He could sense everything outside, but he didn't wake up. Not only that, but the flow of time in Li Daochong's sea of consciousness was very slow. 1.5 months outside seemed to be several years inside. The 9-split saber art was practiced in his sea of consciousness over and over again. Li Daochong was already very familiar with the 3-level saber art. Every time he practiced, the spirit qi in Li Daochong's body would become purer. The spirit qi transformed by the nether ghost power was majestic and vigorous, but it couldn't completely fuse with Li Daochong's spirit veins. Most of it was scattered in other parts of his body and couldn't be used. The process of practicing the cultivation technique allowed all the spirit qi to be used and converged into the spirit veins bit by bit. That night, Yin Ping lay beside Li Daochong and fell into a deep sleep. A halo gradually emerged from Li Daochong's body. Dozens of seconds later, it disappeared. Li Daochong's sea of consciousness made a sound, followed by a notification. Chapter 97. While sleeping, Li Daochong entered the 10th layer of the Qi refining realm while cultivating in his sea of consciousness. The spiritual energy in his body was constantly purifying and gathering, causing the 9 meridians to slowly connect together. Unknowingly, the spirit root began to take shape. Starting from the 8th layer of the Qi refining realm, every layer of cultivation would be a qualitative leap. The 11th layer of the Qi refining realm was the highest layer of the Qi refining realm. Once it was broken through, it would be the Qi gathering realm. But the most important thing was the 10th layer of the Qi refining realm, which was the first layer where the 9 meridians would merge. If he wanted to break through this level, he would not be able to complete the breakthrough simply by increasing his spirit energy. he would have to connect all 9 meridians together to form the embryonic form of the spirit root before he could enter the next level. Li Daochong, on the other hand, was building the spirit root while cultivating in his sea of consciousness. As long as there was enough spiritual energy, entering the 11th layer of the qi refining realm would be a piece of cake. When the last meridian was completely connected with the other 8 meridians, Li Daochong let out a long cry in his sea of consciousness. His telekinesis had reached a new level, and his sea of consciousness was clear. The 10th layer of the qi refining realm had been completely consolidated. At this moment, Li Daochong had finally completely recovered. His body was indescribably comfortable, and his spirit had also changed. Li Daochong slowly opened his eyes. The sky was already bright, and Yinping was not by his side. He stretched and jumped off the bed. Surprisingly, his body did not show any signs of numbness, and was even more flexible than before. The world in Li Daochong's eyes had slightly changed again. As for what exactly was different, he himself could not tell. In short, it was different. Buzz buzz. A blood mosquito flew by. Li Daochong looked in the direction of the sound. The blood mosquito was less than half a centimeter long, and every movement was clearly seen by Li Daochong. Even its wings flapping hundreds of times per second were clearly seen by Li Daochong. Li Daochong stretched out his index finger and flicked it gently. The poor blood mosquito instantly turned into ashes and disappeared. Goo goo. A drum-like sound came from Li Daochong's stomach. Clang. Yinping pushed the door open and saw Li Daochong standing beside the bed. The basin in his hand had fallen to the ground, and hot water had soaked the floor. Yinping's legs were also covered in water. However, the girl didn't seem to notice anything. Her lips trembled as she stared at Li Daochong in a daze. After a few seconds of silence, Yinping burst into tears. She threw herself at Li Daochong and hugged him, not caring about the seniority between master and servant. "Young master, you're awake. You're finally awake. I thought you would never wake up again." Li Daochong patted Yinping's little head and opened his arms to embrace the little girl. Her frail body could be hugged with one arm, and she was even thinner than before. Li Daochong's heart ached. He said gently, "All right, don't cry. How could young master not wake up? Even if the king of hell came to drag young master away, young master would never leave with him. Do you know why?" Yinping raised her head and looked at Li Daochong in a daze. She asked cooperatively, "Why?" Li Daochong couldn't help but scratch Yinping's nose. He said, "Because then young master wouldn't be able to eat Yinping's cooking. How could he stop if he didn't eat it for a few hundred years?" Yinping's delicate little face immediately turned red. Her sparkling skin was about to drip water. She wiped her tears and said seriously, "As long as Yinping can still cook, young master can eat it for as many years as he wants." "Ha ha, that's even better." Li Daochong pinched Yinping's little face and laughed. "Young master, are you hungry?" Yinping asked softly as she buried her head in Li Daochong's chest. She was a little embarrassed. "Hungry, very hungry, very hungry. I'm about to starve to death," Li Daochong said, unable to hold back his thirst. "Ah, then I'll go cook for young master now." Yinping was shocked. She pushed Li Daochong away and ran out like a wisp of smoke. Not long after, the sound of cooking came from the kitchen. Li Daochong felt an indescribable warmth in his heart. He stood at the door and saw Yinping's busy figure across the courtyard. An incomparably blissful smile appeared on his face. "Girl, it's been hard on you. When the competition is over, young master will take you around the Blue Bay Star," Li Daochong murmured apologetically. What was the purpose of cultivation? At this moment, Li Daochong seemed to have a new understanding of it. In less than half an hour, Yinping had cooked a table full of dishes. The portions were naturally sufficient. Now that they had money, no matter how big the young master's appetite was, it would be enough. Of course, the taste was also excellent. No matter how good the restaurants outside were, in Li Daochong's eyes, the The best food was still Yinping's cooking. Li Daochong was indeed starving. He swept up all the dishes on the table like a tornado. His mouth was full and he kept praising Yinping. Girl, you eat too. Li Daochong picked up some food and gave it to Yinping. Young master, you eat. I'm not hungry, Yinping replied with a smile. Seeing the young master eat happily, she was very satisfied. How can that be? Let's eat together. Hurry up and be obedient. Otherwise, young master will be unhappy. Li Daochong pretended to be angry. As long as Li Daochong was unhappy, Yinping would immediately panic. She would immediately listen to him. Yinping immediately picked up the bowl and chopsticks and started eating in big mouthfuls. She did not care about her image. The way she ate was comparable to Li Daochong. Girl, do you want to cultivate? Li Daochong suddenly asked on a whim. Cultivate? Yinping was confused. She looked at Li Daochong. Young master, how can a card slave cultivate? Why not? Li Daochong asked. Kata star people's physique is very weak among the human race. They are not suitable for cultivation. In addition, the master of the card slave does not want the card slave to be too powerful. This will threaten the master's position. Yinping explained. Who said you are weak? That is just the slave master brainwashing you. Young master thinks you are suitable for cultivation. Li Daochong retorted. Young master, you just need to cultivate. Yinping does not need to cultivate. Yinping's task is to take care of your daily life and let you live comfortably. Yinping said earnestly, but she sighed in her heart. The young master's brain was really active. He came up with such a strange idea. How could a card slave cultivate? Yinping saw Li Daochong's eyes burning with passion. She suddenly felt tired. Last time, the master and servant discussed whether or not the card slave was a property problem. Did the young master's brain short-circuit again? Yinping, think about it. If you don't cultivate, how long will your lifespan be? Li Daochong put down his chopsticks and said seriously. In fact, Li Daochong suddenly thought that letting Yinping cultivate was to ensure her safety. He could not stay by her side all the time. Li Daochong still had a lingering fear from the assassination. If the assassin did not only kill him, but also the people around him, Yinping was obviously the easiest one. Last time, fortunately, Yinping and Li Tianyang went to the Li family together. Otherwise, who knew what would have happened? Now that he thought about it, Li Daochong felt a lingering fear. Li Daochong knew that Yinping had been instilled with the idea of slavery since birth. It was hard to reason with her, so he changed his perspective to guide her. Young master, the average lifespan of a card slave is around 60. Those with better health can live up to 80. That's the limit. Yinping replied seriously. Then if I can become a Jin Dan cultivator like my dad, how long will my lifespan be? Li Daochong continued to ask. Yinping tilted her head and thought. Yinping is not very sure, but I should have around 200 years of lifespan. Li Daochong laughed. That's right. If you die before me, who will serve me for the rest of my life? Yinping's little face suddenly became sad. That's right. Who will serve young master then? Li Daochong continued to guide her. Girl, you see, if you cultivate, you can also enter the Jin Dan stage. Then you can also live up to 200 years old. Then you can continue to serve me. Yinping clapped her hands. That's right. Young master, you're so smart. Li Daochong chuckled. How can I be your young master if I'm not smart? From today onwards, you will cultivate. When the time comes, I will give you 2 good mental cultivation methods and cultivation method. Yinping nodded dumbly. Okay. Determined to cultivate to the Jin Dan stage and follow in young master's footsteps to live up to 200 years old, Yinping was serious. The master and servant reached an agreement. Li Daochong opened a bottle of wine and had a small drink with Yinping. Just as they finished drinking, Li Qinyao came back from outside. Seeing Li Daochong wake up, Li Qinyao cried tears of joy, but when she calmed down, Li Qingyao looked at Li Daochong strangely. Silly girl, why are you looking at me like that? Is there something on my face? Li Daochong touched his face. Brother, news of your death has spread like wildfire in the school. Li Qingyao said something shocking. News of my death? Li Daochong was stunned. That's right. Who said that? Chapter 98. News of Li Daochong being devoured by a mutated dark ghost while he was traveling spread throughout Tianyuan City. Li Daochong sneered in his heart after hearing Li Qingyao's story. Of course, someone had spread the news. Clearly, they wanted to test whether he was dead or not. The assassin sent to kill him had been burned to ashes by Chu Qianyue. How could a dead person report back? The person who hired the assassin didn't know whether he was dead or not and didn't dare to reveal himself, so they used this method to test him. Qingyao, what did you say? Li Daochong asked. I only said that I didn't contact you after you went out, Li Qingyao replied. If someone asks you in the future, say the same thing, Li Daochong instructed. Since someone wanted him dead, he would let them think that he was dead for now. Before the competition began, Li Daochong didn't want anything to go wrong. Li Qingyao seemed to understand Li Daochong's intentions and nodded. Okay, big brother. After resting for 2 days, Li Daochong spent another 3 days researching spirit sequences and successfully creating 2 level 4 fire talismans. After that, Li Daochong left the old mansion through the underground passage and went to the underground city. There was still a month until the competition. It wasn't a long time, but it wasn't a short time either. Li Daochong didn't want to waste time. If Li Daochong wanted to cultivate, the only way was to kill dark ghosts. Other methods were only supplementary. After nearly 4 months, Li Daochong came to the underground city again. This time, the feeling was completely different from the previous 2 times. When Li Daochong first came here, his cultivation was too low. He felt very uneasy in this underground force where crooks mixed in with the honest folk and did not play by the rules. Now Li Daochong was at the 10th stage of the Qi refinement realm. His embryonic spirit root had formed. His strength was completely different from before. Blue Bay Star was a 4th-class cultivation planet in the Federation. The strongest cultivator there was only at the early stage of Jindan. Li Tianyang was an exception. Originally, Li Tianyang alone was enough to raise Blue Bay Star to a 3rd-class cultivation planet. Unfortunately, the heavens were jealous of geniuses, and that was no longer possible. There were less than 10 Jindan early-stage cultivators in the entire Blue Bay Star. Most of them were old guys who were over 150 years old. They could only live in seclusion in the depths of their families to recuperate and extend their lifespans as much as possible. There were only 3 or 4 Jindan cultivators on Blue Bay Star who were still alive and kicking. There weren't many Foundation establishment cultivators in Blue Bay Star. There weren't more than 200 of them. Half of them were sent out by their respective families, and the remaining half were mostly in the early and middle stages of Foundation establishment. In Blue Bay Star, reaching the peak stage of the Qi gathering stage was already considered a very powerful expert. The 10th level of Qi refining was naturally not considered powerful, but in the entire Blue Bay Star, it was definitely at the middle level. If he had 1 or 2 trump cards on him, it wasn't impossible for him to fight with someone at the early stage of the Qi gathering stage. Li Daochong would have enough capital to fight with an assassin of the same strength as before if he were to launch a sneak attack. With the 9 split saber technique and 2 4th-class fire talismans, even a cultivator at the early stage of the Qi gathering stage would have to consider whether their trump cards were strong enough to deal with Li Daochong. Otherwise, it was very likely that they would fail miserably. This time, Li Daochong was familiar with the underground city. He went straight to the Shadow Serene Street. Last time, Li Daochong had become a junior member, so it was very easy for him to enter the Shadow Serene Street. Li Daochong was wearing a training sweater, a hat, and a mask. Most people who came to the underground city didn't want to expose themselves, so most of them wore covert clothes. People dressed like Li Daochong were everywhere. Li Daochong entered the Shadow Serene Street and went straight to the South District. He only had one goal today, and that was to find the old man who had sold him the ghost disciple last time. Before coming, Li Daochong had sent a message to the old man. Last time, the two of them had left their spiritual net IDs, so it was easy to contact them. The old man was called Old Devil Zhang on the spiritual net. Li Daochong wanted to find Old Devil Zhang to find out where he had caught the ghost disciple. Because they had agreed beforehand, Li Daochong went to find Old Devil Zhang as soon as he arrived at the South District of the Shadow Serene Street. Just like last time, there was a stall next to Old Devil Zhang. He didn't care about the customers who came to look at the goods, and only focused on fiddling with the spirit brain in front of him. Li Daochong stood in front of the stall and took off his mask. Just as he was about to speak, Old Devil Zhang slammed the table. "Damn it, I made a mistake again. Let's try reversing the spirit sequence coding," Li Daochong said as he looked at the screen in front of Old Devil Zhang's spirit brain. "Is that so?" Old Devil Zhang stared blankly for a moment. He didn't care who the speaker was. His turbid eyes stared at the spirit brain, and he immediately began to operate it. A few minutes later, Old Devil Zhang said in amazement, It really is reversed. Brother, you're still the best. You can see the problem with just a glance." "What do you want to buy?" Halfway through his words, Old Devil Zhang turned his head. When he saw Li Daochong, he stopped and laughed. "Haha, so it's you. Young man, you came at the right time. Come and help me take a look at this spirit brain. Recently, it's been acting up again. It's always unstable. I've already lost several original blueprints." Li Daochong immediately took Old Devil Zhang's spirit brain. After tapping on the keyboard a few times, he quickly found the problem. Although spirit brains and computers were very different, there were also similarities. Li Daochong's predecessor had a very solid foundation. After understanding the principles of the spirit brain, Li Daochong could easily find the problem with any spirit brain. In a few minutes, Li Daochong reconstructed the spirit brain's internal code and fixed all the loopholes. After Old Devil Zhang took back the spirit brain and fiddled with it a few times, his eyes widened as he looked at Li Daochong in disbelief. "Young man, you're really godly. I had several powerful spirit sequence masters in the Shadow Serene Square fix it, but they couldn't find the problem. You just casually fiddled with this spirit brain, and all the things that were lost inside were recovered. Just who did you learn from?" Li Daochong laughed. "Can't I learn without a teacher?" Although it was a joke, Old Devil Zhang could tell that Li Daochong wasn't willing to talk about it, so he didn't ask any more. "Young man, you've helped me a lot this time. Tell me, what do you want to buy? I'll give you a 50% discount like last time." Old Devil Zhang said straightforwardly. "Senior, I don't want to buy anything this time. I want to ask, where did you catch these low-level dark ghosts?" Li Daochong asked. "What? Are you trying to steal this old man's business?" Old Devil Zhang joked. "How could I dare steal Senior's business? My master needs to catch a few big ghosts, and it's too dangerous outside the seven-ring star field, so he wants to find a safer place to catch them." Li Daochong casually found an excuse. "Hee, as long as you're not trying to steal my business, then that's good. Young man, you've helped me a lot this time, so this old man will make an exception and tell you. However, aside from your master, you can't reveal any information to anyone else. Otherwise, don't blame this old man for falling out with you." Old Devil Zhang was still smiling at the beginning, but his face sank as he spoke with a hint of warning. "Senior, don't worry. This junior knows that this matter is very important, so I won't reveal it to anyone else," Li Daochong promised. This old man likes you and trusts you. With your mastery of the spirit brain, I don't think you're some shady person. After old Devil Zhang finished speaking, he looked around and approached Li Daochong. He whispered, "Even if I tell you where that place is, you won't be able to enter. Wait for me, I'm going to make a trip there to replenish my supplies. Business has been pretty good recently, and someone has reserved 15 green ghosts. You can help me out." After saying that, old Devil Zhang began to tidy up his stall. It didn't take long for him to put everything into his storage bag. The old man and the young man walked out of the movie market together. Old Devil Zhang's feet moved faster and faster. Li Daochong quietly followed behind. After walking for a while, old Devil Zhang's face revealed a hint of surprise. Old Devil Zhang wanted to test Li Daochong, but he didn't expect this kid to be able to follow him without a change in expression. Old Devil Zhang couldn't help but become curious about Li Daochong's identity. He was proficient in the spirit brain and had extraordinary strength. It was impossible for him to be unknown on Blue Bay Star. However, no matter how old Devil Zhang searched his memories, he couldn't find any information about Li Daochong. This young man seemed to have appeared out of thin air. 10 minutes later, the old man and the young man arrived in front of an ancient castle. Li Daochong's eyes revealed a hint of surprise. Wasn't this the Deadwood Castle? The first time he came to the underground city, he was brought here by Ouyang Qian. "Young man, this old man still doesn't know your name. Can you tell me? I can't always call you young man, right?" Old Devil Zhang stopped and asked. "My surname is Li, my name is Chong." Li Daochong immediately replied, but he removed the word Dao from his name. Old Devil Zhang nodded. "Li Chong, when we go in, don't stray too far from me. This castle has become more and more strange recently. The spatial fluctuations inside are very unstable. Only one of the spatial gates is orderly. The others are all chaotic spatial gates. If you accidentally enter, even a Jin Dan cultivator won't be able to return." Chapter 99. Li Daochong followed old Devil Zhang into the Deadwood Castle. After several months, the situation inside the castle was even weirder than before. Li Daochong felt that the space here was chaotic, as if it was constantly changing. Old Devil Zhang's route seemed to be random, but in fact it was very knowledgeable. Every step was very precise, avoiding those invisible but dangerous space vortexes. After Li Daochong entered the Deadwood Castle, he felt extremely unsafe. He could very clearly see the changes in the flow of space. Even without old Devil Zhang, Li Daochong could also smoothly avoid the space vortexes. Li Daochong suddenly thought of a term that Chu Qianyue often mentioned during the special training, space perception. At that time, Li Daochong didn't quite understand what Chu Qianyue meant, but now he finally understood. Chu Qianyue taught him more than he imagined. At this time, Li Daochong realized that he was just a frog at the bottom of the well. He knew nothing about the outside world. Soon, old Devil Zhang brought Li Daochong to an abandoned room on the 3rd floor of the Deadwood Castle. The space here seemed to be flowing. Old Devil Zhang jumped forward and finally landed in the left corner of the room. Li Daochong did the same. One old and one young stood facing the wall. Li Daochong could clearly see the vortex on the wall. Otherwise, he would definitely think that old Devil Zhang must have made a mistake. "Li Chong, are you ready?" Old Devil Zhang suddenly asked. "Ready," Li Daochong replied. Old Devil Zhang chuckled. He grabbed Li Daochong's back and leaped toward the wall. The old man and the young man crashed into the wall. However, the scene of them crashing into the wall didn't appear. The two disappeared into the wall. It was as if no one had ever appeared in the abandoned room on the 3rd floor of the Deadwood Castle. Only the occasional unstable space made a slight sound. "Sheng?" Li Daochong only felt that his eyes were flashing. The surrounding scenery was moving at high speed. He felt a tingling sensation on his body. In just a few seconds, His eyes turned black and he entered a dusky space. "We're here." Li Daochong felt strange. This place did not feel like a secret area or a planet. It felt like another room in Deadwood Castle, except that the walls were all made of metal. "Welcome to the Evil Spirit Universe Shuttle." Old Ghost Zhang smiled. "Evil Spirit Universe Shuttle?" Li Daochong was confused. "That's right. On the other side of that naturally formed portal is this giant shuttle that has been floating on the starship for who knows how many years," Old Devil Zhang replied. Li Daochong revealed a look of disbelief. He hadn't expected Old Ghost Zhang to capture Dark Ghost on a space shuttle. The temperature here was obviously much lower, and the walls and ground were covered in a thick layer of frost. The temperature was -30 to -40 degrees Celsius, but the surroundings were not completely dark. Some light from the outside would shine in through the gap. Fortunately, Li Daochong had successfully advanced to the 10th layer of qi refining, and his spiritual root had already taken shape. It was more than enough for him to withstand such low temperatures. If it was -70 to -80 degrees Celsius, Li Daochong would not be able to withstand it. He would have to circulate his spirit qi to resist the cold. There was nothing else he could do. Old Ghost Zhang was about to support Li Daochong with a layer of insulation, but when he turned to look at Li Daochong, he realized that the kid was not afraid of such low temperatures at all. Old Ghost Zhang's old face revealed a look of surprise. What was this kid's cultivation level? He looked like he was only 18 or 19 years old. This place was not as simple as the low temperature. Everywhere was filled with the aura of death. The entire space shuttle had been occupied by Dark Ghost for hundreds of years. Not a single person on board was left alive. They had all become food for the Dark Ghost. If it was just the low temperature, it would not be strange for this young man to be able to resist Old Ghost Zhang. But such a thick aura of death did not make him feel uncomfortable at all. That was very impressive. Old Ghost Zhang could sense that Li Daochong's aura was around the 7th layer of qi refining. However, his telekinesis could not sense the Jin Dan realm, so it was impossible to be accurate. Li Daochong's current state was definitely above the 7th layer of qi refining. When Old Ghost Zhang first came here, he had brought a group of people. The situation was unclear, and they were cannon fodder. Naturally, he had to bring a few kids to scout the way. At the time, 2 of the 7th layer of qi refining could not withstand it. Li Chong, not bad. You're not even afraid of such a strong aura of death. You don't look very old. Your future is limitless. Hee, with a helper like you, this old man can try to catch a few big ghosts today, Old Ghost Zhang praised. Senior, you must be joking. Li Daochong calmly replied. As soon as he entered, he immediately expanded his telekinesis. In order to increase his accuracy, he had to focus. Everything within a 300-meter radius was within Li Daochong's grasp. Li Daochong was shocked. The 300-meter radius was actually within the range of the space shuttle. Just how big was this space shuttle? Could it be the giant space shuttle? It was as big as a small town. It was a giant space shuttle used for transportation and colonization. Li Chong, follow this old man and don't go astray. This space shuttle has a diameter of over 2 kilometers, and its internal structure is rather complicated. So far, the area we've explored is still considered safe. We've set up a spirit formation here, so big ghosts and above cannot enter. If you accidentally go out of the safe area, it'll be hard to say. I heard that there are evil ghosts outside the safe area. If you run into them, it'll be troublesome. Old Ghost Zhang reminded. Understood, Senior. Li Daochong agreed. Old Ghost Zhang said as he walked out of the room. Li Daochong followed behind him. Outside was a dark corridor. It was no more than 3 meters wide, and there were rows of doors on both sides. Old Ghost Zhang obviously came here often and was very familiar with the terrain. He led Li Daochong into a large hall. A few wandering ghosts floated at one end of the hall. Sensing life, they howled hungrily and pounced. Old Ghost Zhang casually threw out a black silk net, catching all the little ghosts in one fell swoop. Crackle, crackle. The black net flickered and the ghosts flickered. Soon, there was no sound and they floated up and down silently. Old Ghost Zhang retracted the net and put the ghosts into a yellow bag at his waist. He patted it and said, "Hee hee, there's already a harvest. I can sell them for tens of thousands." As they walked forward, Li Daochong became a spectator. The black net in Old Ghost Zhang's hand seemed to have no end. He caught all the dark ghosts he saw, from the small ones to the big ones, and they were all sucked into the yellow bag. Li Daochong was envious, but he couldn't absorb the dark ghosts in front of Old Ghost Zhang, so he could only watch. 10 minutes later, Old Ghost Zhang's harvest was quite bountiful. There were at least 30 dark ghosts of various levels in the bag at his waist. Old Ghost Zhang saw that he had harvested enough and said, "Li Chong, there's a restaurant not far ahead. There are 2 powerful ghosts inside, the Black Fiend and the Black Fiend. They're not easy to deal with. Last time I almost fell. Killing them is easy, but capturing them alive is not so easy. Help me, and if you can capture them, I'll give you 30,000. What do you think?" "Sure, Senior Zhang. Tell me what you need me to do." Li Daochong naturally wouldn't refuse money. Old Ghost Zhang looked uncertainly at Li Daochong and asked, "I need some time to lay down the Black Fiend. Help me stall the Black Fiend, and I'll stall the Black Fiend. It'll take about 5 minutes. Can you hold them off?" "I'll try," Li Daochong replied. Dark ghosts at the Great Ghost level not only had high intelligence, but their strength had also greatly increased. With Li Daochong's current strength, dealing with a top-level green ghost was a bit difficult, let alone a great ghost. But for some reason, Li Daochong wasn't afraid at all when he saw dark ghosts. On the contrary, he was very excited. The fragrance of dark ghosts made him subconsciously lick his lips. Old Ghost Zhang didn't hesitate. He didn't care whether Li Daochong could really stall them or not. He took out a banner and shot forward. Li Daochong curled his lips and followed. Soon, they arrived at the restaurant. The death energy inside was clearly thicker than outside. The restaurant was pitch black, and one couldn't even see one's fingers. Ghostly screams occasionally came from the darkness. They weren't loud, but they made one's hair stand on end. With a breath, white mist curled up, and the temperature dropped a few degrees. Old Ghost Zhang didn't hesitate at all. He lightly shouted and heavily slammed his palm on the ground. With a bang, a wave of energy spread out. He then took out the banner in his hand and stuck it in front of the restaurant. He then warned, "Li Chong, be careful." As soon as he said this, 2 figures, one large and one small, shot out from the darkness of the restaurant. Li Daochong was given a fright. He hadn't expected the dark ghosts here to be so ferocious. Li Daochong subconsciously took 2 steps back, an ice talisman ready in his hand. Just as he was about to send it out, there was a loud bang. The mother-child Black Fiends slammed into an invisible wall and bounced back. Li Daochong realized that the banner Old Ghost Zhang had planted in the restaurant had emitted a stream of energy. That invisible wall had been created by this stream of energy. Old Ghost Zhang aimed a net at the larger Black Fiend, but as soon as the net covered the female Black Fiend, there was a pop as the black net was corroded by death energy. The female Black Fiend seemed to be agitated and instantly shot back, transforming into a black streak of light. Bang! There was a dull thud. Thump! The banner stuck in the ground toppled over. "What?" Old Ghost Zhang cried out in alarm. He hadn't expected that the heavenly net formation he had so carefully designed would be knocked over by the female Black Fiend. As Old Ghost Zhang spoke, the female Black Fiend lunged at him, a pair of claws made of black energy swiping at him. At the same time, the female Black Fiend also lunged at Li Daochong. Old Ghost Zhang shouted, "Li Chong, the heavenly net formation flag is broken and can't set up the spiritual array." Run, these two mother-child black fiends, I can only kill them. While shouting, a wooden sword appeared in old Ghost Zhang's hand and stabbed at the female black fiend. Boom, crack, the wooden sword broke before it even touched the female black fiend. Bang, old Ghost Zhang was sent flying by the female black fiend. If he hadn't been wearing a middle-grade human rank robe, he would have suffered internal injuries. Old Ghost Zhang spat. His old eyes were full of anger. If he hadn't been injured before, how could a mere female black fiend knock him away? It was simply a disgrace. On the other side, Li Daocheng's ice talisman was the foundation, and the ice-cold spirit instantly wrapped around the female black fiend. Li Daocheng stepped forward, stretched out his hand, and the Zamadeo appeared in his hand. He flicked it up. Zing! Silver light flashed. The female black fiend's body was split in half. Old Ghost Zhang stared at this scene with his mouth agape. The old man suspected that his eyes were playing tricks on him. An 18 or 19-year-old youth, who was at most in the 8th or 9th level of qi refining, actually split the female black fiend in half. However, in just the blink of an eye, the female black fiend's severed body merged back together and returned to its original state. The black fiend was invisible and could be reborn infinitely. It was impossible to cut it off. Chapter 100. Li Daocheng coldly looked at Zi Heisha. Just now, he had used all of his strength. First of all, Li Daocheng did not dare to be careless when facing a great ghost, dark ghost. If he could be ruthless, he would not let it go easily. Li Daocheng had not only used all of his strength in this attack, but he had also used the first layer of the 9-split saber art. Crushed stone and split the earth. The saber energy contained spiritual energy and had a chain effect. Zi Heisha's body had just healed, but before it could completely reconnect, it was split apart by the saber energy. Old Devil Zhang was dumbfounded as he looked at Zi Heisha's state. His old eyes were filled with shock as he turned to look at Li Daocheng. To have such an amazing cultivation technique at such a young age, he was simply a monster. When Li Daocheng had called him senior, old Devil Zhang had been very happy and felt that he was worthy of being called senior. But now, old Devil Zhang felt his face burning, and he felt ashamed. Old Devil Zhang was at the late stage of qi gathering, but he did not know such a high-end cultivation technique. Of course, as a spirit array master, he was not a close combat cultivator and relied on tricks to fight. Whether it was against humans or ghosts, old Devil Zhang rarely fought head-on. He relied on magic treasures and spirit arrays to fight. As for Li Daocheng, it was very rare for old Ghost Zhang to fight Heisha head-on. Zi Heisha's body exploded into more than 10 pieces, but the death aura on its body showed no signs of weakening. A beep came from Li Daocheng's knowledge sea, and a wave of power immediately came out. The fragments of Zi Heisha were like some kind of great tonic in his eyes. Li Daocheng strode forward and reached out, grabbing one of the fragments. The fragment disappeared, absorbed into his body. Killed Zi Heisha's fragment. Obtained soul power, converted into spiritual energy. A notification sounded. Immediately, the spiritual energy in Li Daocheng's body increased. Even if it was just a fragment of a great ghost-level soul power, it was still many times more than the low ghost-level soul power. Li Daocheng's eyes flashed, and he was overjoyed. There was actually such a thing. It turned out that he could convert soul power without having to swallow it whole. Wasn't the 9-split saber art tailor-made for him? This scene was not seen by old Devil Zhang because the female black fiend pounced on him again, and the black fiend qi enveloped old Devil Zhang. Old Ghost Zhang shrieked as another banner appeared in his hand. He shouted, "Soul sealing banner, soul power seal." A brown python slithered out of the banner and tangled with the black qi released by the female black fiend. Old Devil Zhang finally escaped, but when he looked at Li Daocheng's side, the black fiend's spirit body was on the verge of collapse, as if it would collapse at any time. Li Daochong did not expect that his strength would increase so quickly after he mastered the 9-split saber technique. A 10th layer Qi refinement cultivator was able to deal with a black demon effortlessly. Only now did Li Daochong realize that he had an innate advantage over Dark Ghost, as if they were his natural enemy. Against Dark Ghost, Li Daochong could not feel the suppression of the death Qi. He had a natural resistance to it. Thus, if Dark Ghost wanted to attack Li Daochong, the only way was to use an effective spirit body attack. Devouring, low-level death arts, illusions, charms, and death Qi were all useless. Under normal circumstances, a 10th layer Qi refinement cultivator would be powerless against a Dark Ghost at the Great Ghost level, even if it was the lowest level. Just the death Qi alone was enough to deal with. Before they could even get close, they would be suppressed by the death Qi and unable to move. Only an early-stage Qi condensation cultivator could contend with a Great Ghost-level Dark Ghost. Li Daochong was clearly an exception. In just a few seconds, Li Daochong absorbed all 6 of the Black Fiend's fragments without leaving a single trace behind. His spirit Qi had increased significantly, almost reaching a quarter of the 10th layer. Li Daochong was overjoyed. If he could absorb the entire Black Fiend, he would enter the mid-stage of the 10th layer Qi refinement. At this moment, Zihei Sha let out a terrified scream. Just now, he had treated the living thing in front of him as a delicious meal, but now, he was scared out of his wits, like a mouse seeing a cat. The Black Fiend's spirit body that had healed back together was obviously much dimmer, and the strength of the death aura was much weaker. Want to run? No way. Li Daochong lightly shouted, and a fire talisman shot out from his hand. Wait. Old Ghost Zhang shouted, but it was too late. That fire talisman turned into a ball of flame that engulfed the weakened Black Fiend. Almost at the same time, Old Devil Zhang threw out a ghost weeping net to cover the flame. In 3 to 4 seconds, the flame burned out, and the black evil spirit's body became transparent, turning into a grayish-white color. The 2 empty green eyes had lost their luster. When Old Ghost Zhang saw that the Black Fiend was not completely destroyed, his old face lit up with joy and he called out softly, "Return." The weeping ghost net immediately closed. Constriction? Steamed bun with bright pine grains? Invading Yong, advising Fei He and favoring Gu Gozi? What? Bung ing huang yu yetting boom. With a loud sound, Old Ghost Zhang's soul-sealing flag exploded into pieces. The brown python that was entangled with the female Black Fiend collapsed and disappeared. Old Ghost Zhang didn't even have time to be happy about getting a Black Fiend before he lost another soul-sealing flag. My flag, sigh. Old Ghost Zhang cried out in pain. A soul-sealing flag was refined for at least 200,000 Federation coins, and it also took a lot of time to refine. 1 gain and 1 loss, Old Ghost Zhang had worked for nothing. The Black Fiend that was caught and had its soul erased wasn't in its peak state. The remaining dead souls could be sold for 100,000 Federation coins, which was already not bad. Old Ghost Zhang felt his heartache and he screamed, "Fuck your mother, if this old man doesn't take you down today, I'll change my surname tomorrow." As he spoke, a bronze mirror appeared in Old Ghost Zhang's hand, and he pointed it at the female Black Fiend, chanting, "Supreme Limitless, borrowing the power of heaven and earth, with a flash of light, demons and ghosts exterminate." Bang! A golden light shot out from the bronze mirror. "Wage, Zhao flattery fu shi shi." Ah! The female Black Fiend screamed in pain, and it echoed in the enclosed space, making Li Daochong's head dizzy. The female Black Fiend suddenly turned into a cloud of black fog, with a twisted ghost face in the middle, and it opened its mouth to pounce on Old Ghost Zhang. "What?" Old Ghost Zhang screamed. This female Black Fiend wasn't even afraid of the light from the demon-expelling mirror. Old Ghost Zhang's internal injuries hadn't healed, and he couldn't avoid the female Black Fiend's desperate counterattack, and he was about to be bitten by the giant mouth. Whoosh! A figure appeared in a flash. Zing! Silver light flashed, and old Ghost Zhang only felt a flash. When he opened his eyes again, the female Black Fiend had been split in half, and it was wriggling in pain in the air. Li Daochong maintained the momentum after the attack, and he chanted in his heart. 9 Split Saber Technique, second stage. Mountains collapsed and the earth cracked. Li Daochong consumed a lot of spiritual energy in his body, and he released most of his spiritual energy in just one move. The female Black Fiend quickly recovered, and it opened its ghost claws to grab Li Daochong on the side. It was bound to tear this ant who dared to attack it into pieces. Li Daochong didn't move, and he didn't even look at the female Black Fiend. His eyes were slightly slanted, revealing a trace of ridicule, and the corners of his mouth were slightly raised. The ghost claws hadn't touched Li Daochong yet. With a bang, the female Black Fiend's body that had just healed exploded into pieces. Old Ghost Zhang, who had wanted to protect Li Daochong, was completely stunned at this moment, and he was petrified in place. Chapter 101. Old Ghost Zhang was shocked, but he didn't forget to capture the female Black Fiend. The female Black Fiend had been split into 20 to 30 pieces by Li Daochong. Although the death energy didn't decrease, it didn't have any fighting power before it healed. These pieces were shining Federation coins in old Ghost Zhang's eyes. He didn't have time to be shocked and directly took out the ghost weep net to harvest the pieces. Without batting an eyelid, Li Daochong reached out and grabbed a few of the fragments that were closest to him and absorbed them. Killed 5 female Black Fiend pieces. Soul power gained. Host has leveled up to level 11. With a boom, the spirit energy in Li Daochong's sea of consciousness gathered. The spirit root that was originally just an embryonic form quickly wriggled, and the 9 meridians completely merged to form a spirit root. Li Daochong only felt that his body was full. He couldn't feel better if he didn't spit it out. His whole body was indescribably comfortable, like he was suddenly enlightened. After absorbing the 2 ghost pieces, he directly broke through to Qi Refinement level 11. The amount of spirit energy converted from the female Black Fiend's dead soul fragments was shocking. If not, Li Daochong wouldn't have been able to level up so easily. The amount of spirit energy needed to go from Qi Refinement level 10 to Qi Refinement level 11 was shocking. Just now, one of the 5 pieces that Li Daochong obtained just happened to be the female Black Fiend's soul core. It was like a blind cat catching a dead mouse. The remaining pieces were all taken into the ghost weep net by the greedy old Ghost Zhang in order to not let the female Black Fiend counterattack. Old Ghost Zhang used a fire talisman to burn more than 20 pieces one by one, but this burn almost burned all of the pieces. When old Ghost Zhang took a look, his old eyes bulged and snot flowed out of his nostrils. He looked at Li Daochong with a pained expression. Li Chong, can't you take it easy? You broke that dead ghost soul core in one hit. The remaining pieces together are not even 1/3 of the original dead soul power. They can't be sold for a good price. Old Ghost Zhang wanted to cry. After all this time, it would be good if the mother and son Black Fiends could be sold for 300,000. It only offset his loss. Old Ghost Zhang complained in his heart. Li Daochong smiled and said, "Senior, I'm sorry. Junior didn't notice." At this moment, Li Daochong addressed him as Senior, causing old Ghost Zhang's heart to skip a beat. He quickly waved his hand and said, "Brother Li, you can't do that. You have such great ability, this old man can't accept you calling me Senior. From now on, you can just call me Old Ghost Zhang." If old Ghost Zhang wasn't injured, he could also deal with the mother-child Black Fiends alone, but it would take some effort. He definitely wouldn't be as relaxed as Li Daochong. Li Daochong was not pretentious and nodded with a smile. In the cultivation world, titles were not based on age. Whoever was stronger was the senior. Li Tianyang was only in his 40s at that time. A bunch of old men in their 70s and 80s all fawned over him and called him senior. Li Daochong's body was full of spirit qi and his hands were itching. He used his telekinesis to sense that there were dark ghosts in a room behind him. He turned around and rushed in. Before old Ghost Zhang could react, Li Daochong came out of the room with 3 green ghost-level dark ghosts in his hand. He threw them to old Ghost Zhang and said, "Here you go." Old Ghost Zhang was a bit embarrassed, but for the sake of money, he didn't care about his old face. He erased the soul consciousness of the 3 dark ghosts and put them away. In the next hour, old Ghost Zhang followed behind Li Daochong and caught a few dozen dark ghosts without any effort. Old Ghost Zhang was overjoyed. He was rich. With so many dark ghosts, he could sell them for at least 1,000,000 Federation coins. He had earned back all his losses. When he returned to Deadwood Castle, old Ghost Zhang's ghost cage bag was bulging. He had made a lot of money. Brother Li, with your skills, making money is like playing around. You have to take care of this old man in the future. Old Ghost Zhang didn't forget to flatter him as he walked out of Deadwood Castle. A qi condensation cultivator fawning over a qi condensation cultivator. It must be strange in the eyes of others. Li Daochong didn't help old Ghost Zhang hunt dark ghosts for free. He had his own plans. There were too many people in the underground city, and it wasn't convenient for him to show his face. Old Ghost Zhang looked like a veteran who had been in the underground city for many years. He must know the underground city like the back of his hand. Seeing how arrogant he was in the movie market, Li Daochong didn't believe that he didn't have some skill. First, he would bribe old Ghost Zhang. In the future, Li Daochong could buy things from him in the underground city, and he wouldn't have to show his face everywhere. Before the competition began, Li Daochong needed to upgrade his Zamadeo in addition to cultivation. Otherwise, the heavy silver essence crystal in his hand would be wasted. If he upgraded his Zamadeo to the Earth rank, Li Daochong's strength would increase again. However, just one heavy silver essence crystal wasn't enough. He needed many other materials. Li Daochong originally wanted to use the equipment exchange system in the hot-blooded upgrader to obtain materials. However, obtaining soul power was very slow and he didn't have a better way at the moment. Li Daochong wanted to buy the remaining materials in the underground city. When it came to refining magic treasures, Li Daochong was basically illiterate. Other than wanting old Ghost Zhang to be his purchasing agent, Li Daochong also wanted him to help him refine his Zamadeo. Old Ghost Zhang, do you know how to refine? Li Daochong casually asked. He had seen old Ghost Zhang use his spirit brain to design a pattern. He guessed that old Ghost Zhang should know, but he still needed to confirm it. Brother Li, I'm not as good as you when it comes to killing ghosts, but when it comes to refining, this old man can be ranked second in the entire underground city. Old Ghost Zhang's eyes revealed a hint of pride. However, in Li Daochong's eyes, he found it somewhat funny. Who's the first? Li Daochong asked. The first naturally belongs to old Ghost Yen Qing of the Shadow Secluded Square. However, he is stronger than me mainly because his cultivation has reached the foundation establishment stage. If I were to reach the foundation establishment stage, even old Ghost Yen would have to admit defeat. Old Ghost Zhang boasted. Then can you refine an Earth rank magic treasure? Li Daochong continued to ask. Of course. Old Ghost Zhang was talking excitedly just now and this word came out of his mouth. However, he quickly stopped and paused before saying, of course not. This old man suffered a serious injury in the past and is now half crippled. At most, I can refine a peak human rank magic treasure. That's my limit unless, old Ghost Zhang stopped talking halfway. Unless what? Li Daochong asked. Unless I have good materials. If this old man's luck isn't bad, I might be able to refine an Earth rank magic treasure. Old Ghost Zhang replied without much confidence. Li Daochong curled his lips. He couldn't rely on luck. There was only one heavy silver essence crystal. If he used it, it would be gone. He had to succeed. The old man and the young man walked for a while. Old Ghost Zhang was impatient to go to the shadow-secluded market. Seeing that Li Daochong was about to leave, he said, "Brother Li, today's dark ghost capture was mostly due to you. This old man only acted as a porter. This many dark ghosts can be sold for a lot of money. When we get the goods, you take 70% and I take 30%. How about it?" "I don't want it." Li Daochong flatly refused. "You don't want it?" Old Ghost Zhang stared at Li Daochong with his mouth wide open. "Yes, I don't want it. It's all yours. However, I need you to help me raise the grade of this blade to high human rank." Li Daochong had a smile on his face as he took out the Zamadeo and handed it to Old Ghost Zhang. "That's it?" Old Ghost Zhang didn't believe that a pie would fall from the sky. He took the Zamadeo from Li Daochong's hand and looked at it. He originally thought that it would be a dual attribute magic treasure, but it turned out to be an ordinary mid-human rank magic treasure. With his level, it would be too easy to raise the grade. "Yes, that's it." Li Daochong nodded. "Haha, no problem. Since Brother Li is straightforward, this old man won't be polite. Don't worry, give me half a month. I will definitely forge this saber of yours into the strongest human rank magic treasure." Old Ghost Zhang patted his chest. "All right, I'll come find you in half a month." Chapter 102. For the next half a month, Li Daochong spent his time in the underground training room of the old mansion and the underground city of Deadwood Castle. With Old Ghost Zhang's help, Li Daochong was able to enter the Titanic space shuttle full of nether ghosts by himself with his powerful spatial perception. Although Li Daochong was somewhat immune to dark ghosts, he wasn't so conceited as to think that he could travel freely in the giant spirit space shuttle the size of a small town. According to Old Devil Zhang's description, Li Daochong wandered around the safety zone of the spiritual array, never stepping out of the line of defense. Dwarf dark ghosts were useless to Li Daochong. No matter if he killed or absorbed them, they wouldn't produce any spiritual energy. Small ghosts were only slightly useful to small ghost generals, but they were negligible. Killing hundreds of them would only produce a sliver of spiritual energy. Only green ghosts were useful to Li Daochong. After the dead souls were converted into spiritual energy, he could feel an obvious increase. But at the 11th level of Qi refinement, Li Daochong's spiritual energy requirement increased again. It was more than double the total of all the spiritual energy he had before. With each level, the difficulty increased exponentially. This was why there were billions of cultivators, but very few could truly become cultivators, perhaps less than 1 in 10,000. The fragments produced by the mother and child black fiends, the 10th level of Qi refinement, were enough for Li Daochong to advance by 1 level. But at the 11th level of Qi refinement, Li Daochong entered the giant spirit space shuttle every day to kill dark ghosts. After half a month, at least several thousand dark ghosts had died at Li Daochong's hands. Small ghosts accounted for more than half, and the rest were green ghosts. He also killed 5 large ghosts. But Li Daochong felt that there was still a long way to go before he reached the Qi condensation stage. However, his spiritual roots had been strengthened and consolidated during this time. Most of these dark ghosts couldn't pose a threat to Li Daochong. Only the large ghosts could make Li Daochong take them seriously. But after repeated mechanical sweeps, Li Daochong's understanding of the 9-split saber technique improved. It could be said that he had reached the point of perfection. The power of the saber was like a thunderclap. Once the saber was out, the ghosts would be destroyed. The hidden power of the saber was endless. Wherever the saber passed, no ghosts would be left. Li Daochong had already killed most of the dark ghosts in the safe zone. All that remained were weak dwarf ghosts that he couldn't be bothered to kill. Half a month later, Li Daochong came to the movie market again. This time, he did not enter the market. Old Devil Zhang asked him to meet him at the entrance of the movie market. Li Daochong was a junior member and could only enter the film market. The entrance to the first floor was separated by a light screen. On one side was the entrance to the movie market, and on the other side was the magnificent counter of the Serene house. Old Devil Zhang was standing at the entrance of the light screen. When he saw Li Daochong come in, he immediately beckoned Li Daochong over. Li Daochong looked at the entrance of the movie market suspiciously. He did not know why old Devil Zhang had chosen to meet here, so he walked over. Li Daochong walked in front of old Devil Zhang. The old man smiled and pulled Li Daochong into the light screen. "Old Devil, I'm only a junior member. I can't go in." Li Daochong hesitated. "Follow me, and you can enter anywhere in the underground city," old Devil Zhang said proudly. This time, it was Li Daochong's turn to be a little confused. He had thought that old Devil Zhang might not be as simple as he seemed, but he did not expect him to be so complicated. Being able to go anywhere in the underground city meant that he had a big background. Seeing Li Daochong's look of disbelief, old Devil Zhang straightened his back and said, "Brother Li, don't worry. This old man won't trick you." Then, old Devil Zhang stepped into the light screen and pulled Li Daochong in as well. The light screen did not block them, nor did the alarm sound. There were more than 10 counters on the first floor of the Serene house. The lights inside were bright, and behind each counter was a beautiful receptionist who was wearing sexy clothes and revealing just the right amount of skin. When Li Daochong was pulled in by old Devil Zhang, the beautiful receptionists inadvertently glanced at Li Daochong, regardless of whether they were serving customers or had nothing to do. When these beautiful receptionists saw that Li Daochong was so young, they were all shocked. Old Devil Zhang pulled Li Daochong directly to the second floor. There were 2 big men in uniform guarding the staircase on the second floor. Seeing the 2 fierce-looking big men, Li Daochong frowned slightly. Using his telekinesis, he found that the 2 big men were masters of Qi refining stage 9. However, the 2 guards had such a cultivation level. It was obvious that the Serene house was very powerful in the underground city. "Hello, old Zhang." When the 2 big men saw old Devil Zhang, they respectfully greeted him. One of them enthusiastically opened the door for old Devil Zhang and Li Daochong to enter the second floor. When they reached the second floor, Li Daochong thought that it was enough. Who would have thought that old Devil Zhang would go up to the third floor? On this floor, there was a young man standing guard. This young man looked to be in his 20s. When Li Daochong probed him, he was slightly shocked. This person's cultivation level was about the same as his own, but a bit more profound. It seemed that he had already touched the threshold of the early stage of Qi gathering. When the young man saw old Devil Zhang, he was also very respectful. He personally opened the door to the third floor. When Li Daochong passed by, the young man showed a trace of surprise. When they entered the third floor, it was no longer a hall. Instead, it was divided into private rooms. Old Devil Zhang led Li Daochong into the innermost room. After entering, Li Daochong's eyes twitched. The room was much bigger than it looked from the outside. It was about 200 square meters. There were many spiritual brains placed against the wall. In the middle of the room was a metal furnace. There was a slight rumbling sound coming from the furnace. Old Devil Zhang came to a long table. There were a lot of things on the table in a mess. There were pieces of metal, wood, jade, and other things. In addition to this, there was a rectangular wooden box on the table. Old Devil Zhang opened the box. Immediately, a wave of heat came out from the inside. A long silver blade was placed inside. It was Li Daochong's Zamadeo. The appearance did not change, but Li Daochong felt that the blade was completely different. There was a layer of faint blue light attached to it. "Brother Li, your blade." Old Devil Zhang smiled as he took out the blade from the box and handed it to Li Daochong. Li Daochong took the blade. He could not help but wave it. With a buzzing sound, a blue flame swept through the void. Good saber. Li Daochong held the long saber hilt and praised. The blade in his hand was much heavier than before. Li Daochong estimated that the Zamadeo's weight had increased by at least 30 jin. However, its size did not change at all. Brotherly, after this blade has passed through my hands, there is no other blade in the human realm that can compare to it. Old Devil Zhang boasted. Half a month ago, when Old Devil Zhang said this, Li Daochong was somewhat skeptical. Now that the blade was in his hand, he believed it. Old Devil Zhang, upgrading it once should cost a lot. How much is it? Li Daochong did not want to take it for free. He did not want to owe a favor. Just as Old Devil Zhang was about to speak, there was a knock on the door, followed by a sweet voice. Old Devil Zhang, are you here? Being disturbed, Old Devil Zhang was a little unhappy. No. The childish answer made Li Daochong not know whether to laugh or cry. Old Devil Zhang, I'm sorry to disturb you. The owner wants to discuss something with you. Chapter 103. Old Zhang, please, if you don't go, I won't be able to report back. The owner will punish me. A sweet voice came from outside the door. Old Ghost Zhang frowned, not at all moved by the sobbing outside the door, and was about to drive her away. Li Daochong said, Old Zhang, you go, I'll wait for you. Old Ghost Zhang hated being disturbed, but he could not ignore Li Daochong's words. Li Daochong's strength was there. At such a young age, he could easily kill a great ghost-level dark ghost. If someone said that he did not have an expert guiding him, Old Ghost Zhang would not believe it. This expert was most likely a Jin Dan cultivator. If he could get closer to Li Daochong, he would have to get closer to that Jin Dan cultivator. Old Ghost Zhang knew the benefits of this. He had been looking for a way to cure his hidden illness all these years, but he had not made any progress. The expert behind Li Daochong might be able to help him. Old Ghost Zhang did not want to miss any chance to cure his hidden illness. In addition, Li Daochong was also very useful. Old Ghost Zhang thought that if he found a better place to catch ghosts, he could invite Li Daochong to go with him, greatly increasing his efficiency. Old Ghost Zhang was proficient in spiritual arrays and refining, but not in close combat. If he met a fierce ghost, he would not have the time to arrange a spiritual array. In most cases he could only run away. This made Old Ghost Zhang very angry. With his attainments in spiritual arrays, as long as he had enough time, not to mention a great ghost, even if a fierce ghost came, he would be able to deal with it. The key was that he had to arrange a spiritual array. Old Ghost Zhang worked hard to reforge Li Daochong's Zamadeo because he wanted to invite Li Daochong to go with him to a place outside the evil spirit flying shuttle's safe zone, where there was a fiend bear great ghost, an extremely powerful great ghost level dark ghost. If there were no Qi gathering middle stage cultivators, he would have to run for his life. The reason Old Ghost Zhang wanted to catch that fiend bear great ghost was because someone wanted to order a high-level great ghost's dead soul from him. The price, 3 million Federation coins. If Old Devil Zhang was alone, he wouldn't have thought about it. There was a lot of money, but he wouldn't risk his life to catch it. After seeing Li Daochong's strength last time, Old Devil Zhang's heart was moved. If this brat went with him, he should be able to capture the fiend bear big demon alive. Old Ghost Zhang could only nod and say, Brotherly, I'm sorry. Wait for me for a while. This old man will be back soon. Don't leave. I still have something to tell you. Li Daochong smiled and nodded. Only then did Old Ghost Zhang say to the door, You go and report first. I'll be right there. Thank you, Mr. Zhang, the sweet voice outside the door replied with joy. Then, the sound of footsteps faded away. Brotherly, please wait in the reception room on the 3rd floor. This is not my private room. Outsiders are not allowed to stay here when I'm not present. Old Devil Zhang said apologetically. Okay. Li Daochong didn't mind. It was normal for there to be rules everywhere. Then, Old Ghost Zhang took Li Daochong out of the room and came to an area in the middle of the third floor. There were more than 10 sofas, coffee tables, and tables with some snacks on them. It was obviously a rest area. At this time, there was no one else in the rest area. After Old Ghost Zhang settled Li Daochong down, he rushed to the 4th floor. Li Daochong had nothing to do. He sat on the sofa and closed his eyes to rest. He used his telekinesis to detect the upgraded Zamadeo in his storage bag. After a minute or two, Li Daochong opened his eyes and looked around curiously. There was a trace of ancient dark energy surging on the coffee table in front of him. Li Daochong was a little curious. He touched it with his telekinesis and found that the coffee table was made of red sandalwood. The shadow-secluded workshop was indeed rich. The tea table in the reception room was made of spiritual wood. Red sandalwood and silver wood were usually used to make exorcism artifacts. They were very valuable, and 1 kilogram could be sold for thousands of federal coins. Such a large tea table would cost at least a few $100,000. Under the coffee table was a carpet made of fire silkworm silk. Li Daochong was surprised. He squatted down and touched the carpet. His hand was warm. He couldn't help but feel a little pity that such a good thing was used as a foot cushion. It was a waste of God's gift. Just as Li Daochong squatted down and touched the carpet, there was a sound of footsteps in the corridor. A young man and a young woman in gorgeous robes walked into the lounge. The person who led them in was a middle-aged man in the robes of the Shadow Serene workshop. He was not tall and had a mustache. Li Daochong recognized the robe on the middle-aged man. It was a gray robe that only the middle-level staff of the Shadow Serene workshop wore. There was a sign on his chest that said, "Floor Manager." The 3 people were stunned when they came in. They saw a young man in a sweater squatting next to the coffee table sneakily. He put his hand on the carpet and seemed to be tearing the silk. The middle-aged man was the floor manager of the 3rd floor. His name was Wang Jinlong. He had been in this position for 3 years. He was a slick person and was very good at currying favor. Wang Jinlong was stunned for a moment. He didn't attack immediately. Instead, he raised his wristwatch and scanned Li Daochong. It didn't matter. The wristwatch immediately alerted him. Wang Jinlong confirmed that the young man in front of him had no record of identity. Suddenly, the smile on his face disappeared. However, he still didn't attack. Instead, he glanced at the 2 distinguished guests beside him. The young man and the young woman came from the 2nd-largest city in Blue Bay Star, Sea Bay Star. Apart from Tianyuan City, Sea Bay Star had the deepest heritage in Blue Bay Star. The 2 young men came from the Lin family, the most powerful family in Sea Bay Star. Apart from the 4 major families in Blue Bay Star, the Lin family was the most powerful family. Lin Yuhan and Lin Jiahao came to the Shadow Serene workshop to purchase items for their family. Most of the items had been finalized. However, there were 2 items that were not enough in stock. Wang Jinlong had already sent people to the warehouse to pick up the items. It would take a while. Wang Jinlong took them to the lounge. Who would have thought that when he arrived, he would see a brat stealing things? Lin Yuhan hated people who reaped without sowing. When she heard the alarm from Wang Jinlong's wristwatch, she was even more certain that the young man in the shabby sweater was a thief. She immediately shouted, "Stop! Where did this thief come from? How dare you sneak into the Shadow Serene workshop to steal things? Are you tired of living?" Wang Jinlong, who hadn't said anything, stepped forward and grabbed Li Daochong when Lin Yuhan stopped him. He scolded angrily, "Little thief, you've got guts. How did you sneak into the Shadow Serene workshop? Tell me, how did you get in? Do you have a spy?" Wang Jinlong didn't believe that a little thief could sneak into the Shadow Serene workshop on his own. There had to be an insider. In the past 2 months, the Shadow Serene workshop had been missing items. Although they weren't valuable items, the entire tower would be emptied sooner or later. However, the investigation had been fruitless. Wang Jinlong was often scolded for his poor management. Let go. Li Daochong was already annoyed by being called a little thief. Now that he was caught, his face turned cold. Wang Jinlong's cultivation was only at the 8th level of qi refinement. The 2 young men from the Lin family were at the 9th level of qi refinement. Chapter 104. When Wang Jinlong heard this, he was furious. Little thief, you are quite arrogant. You are caught red-handed and yet you are still so arrogant. Do you have something to rely on? Li Daochong reached out and pushed Wang Jinlong away. The latter didn't pay attention and was pushed back 2 steps. Lin Yuhan hated evil. Seeing that the little thief dared to make a move, she put on her gloves and rushed forward to punch Li Daochong's face. Li Daochong was really angry now. The moment these 3 people appeared, they inexplicably called him a thief. Based on what? Just because he was dressed shabbily? Looking down on others. Li Daochong circulated his qi and punched out. Pung! With a muffled sound, Lin Yuhan retreated more than 10 steps until she was out of the resting room and hit the corridor wall. When Wang Jinlong saw this, his heart jumped. He didn't expect the little thief to be so powerful. Lin Yuhan was the pride of the younger generation in Beici City. When Lin Jiahao saw his cousin being pushed back, he was also angry. With a flash of silver light, a long sword appeared in his hand and he slashed towards Li Daochong. Wang Jinlong took in a cold breath. He wanted to stop it, but it was too late. Lin Jiahao's sword would split the little thief in half. Lin Jiahao's strength was on par with Lin Yuhan. But with a weapon in hand, the power wasn't something a fist could compare to. Before Wang Jinlong could react, Lin Jiahao's sword had already slashed down. Damn it, someone is going to die. I have to take the blame again. Wang Jinlong's temples were dripping with sweat. He was hoping that the little thief could dodge it. At this moment, Lin Yuhan rushed in again. When she saw Lin Jiahao's sword, she was shocked. That sword was refined by an elder of the Jian clan who specialized in refining weapons. It was a middle-grade human-tier weapon. In fact, it was even more powerful than weapons of the same tier. It was incomparably sharp and could cut through iron like mud. No dodge! Lin Yuhan exclaimed. That little thief stood on the spot and didn't move. He watched as the sword slashed towards him. It was unknown if he didn't hear Lin Yuhan's exclamation or if he heard it. He couldn't dodge at all. The little thief's next move made Lin Yuhan and Wang Jinlong's hearts turn cold. He actually raised his right hand to block the sword? How could a fleshy arm block a transcendent artifact weapon? What a joke, that underling would be chopped off in a second. But a crisp sound rang out. Li Daochong's right index finger and middle finger gently pinched, and the swift and violent long sword instantly stopped. Lin Yuhan and Wang Jinlong widened their eyes in disbelief as they watched this scene. Lin Jiahao was stunned. He tried his best to press down on the sword. He even used his other hand, but the sword didn't budge at all. Li Daochong flicked 2 of his fingers and snapped the sword in half. Then, he kicked Lin Jiahao, sending him flying backward and crashing into the sofa. Li Daochong loosened his grip, and the broken sword fell to the ground. Wang Jinlong had a bad feeling. A small thief was not a small thief, but a big thief. He pressed the button on his wristwatch to sound the alarm. Lin Yuhan and Lin Jiahao both looked at Li Daochong in astonishment. They were shocked. This little thief looked to be about the same age as them, but his strength completely overwhelmed them. As the descendants of the big families, they couldn't accept it for a while. If it was someone of the same age from the 4 big families, they could accept it. But the other party was not only unfamiliar, but also a small thief. How could they accept it? At this moment, a huge pressure came, and a big man in a black suit came in. This big man had a fierce look, a hideous scar on his face, and his aura was close to the late stage of qi gathering. He was actually a master in the middle stage of qi gathering. Not to mention the underground city, even in the whole Tianyuan city, this strength was above average. Lin Yuhan and Lin Jiahao couldn't help but stand aside. A master in the middle stage of qi gathering was the level of a deacon in the Lin family. Some elders were only in the qi gathering stage. When Wang Jinlong saw Hong Yahai, the head of the security department of the secluded house, the tension on his face immediately eased. Hong Yahai's face was full of anger. Just now, he was receiving a lady in a private room on the second floor. The two of them exchanged glances and already had a preliminary intention. As long as he worked harder, the two of them would soon have sex. At the crucial moment, the alarm on his wristwatch rang. It was an orange alert, indicating that someone had invaded. As the head of the security department, Hong Yahai had to take full responsibility for the invasion of the secluded house. If the matter got out of hand, the owner of the secluded house would punish him, and he would lose his position as the head of the security department. A transfer order would be issued, and he would be directly sent out of the Six Rings galaxy. That would be terrible. No matter how bold Hong Yahai was, he didn't dare to be careless. Without saying anything, he left the lady behind and rushed forward. He even knocked over the teacup in the lady's hand. He didn't even have time to apologize before he left. Just like that, his romantic encounter was ruined. How could Hong Yahai not be angry? He wanted to see who dared to behave atrociously in the area he was in charge of. Manager Wang, who is the troublemaker? Hong Yahai asked in a rough voice. That guy stole something. Wang Jinlong pointed at Li Daochong and said. How did he get in? Hong Yahai stared and asked. The secluded house was heavily guarded, and even a fly would have a hard time flying in. Chief Hong, I suspect there is a spy, Wang Jinlong said. Could it be that girl, Xingjiao? She wasn't the only one who didn't have an alibi when the ore was stolen. She was also present when the customer's wallet was stolen. She was also on duty when 10,000 yuan was missing from the counter. Hong Yahai immediately thought of the recent theft in the secluded house. It's possible. Wang Jinlong's eyes flashed. Xingjiao was transferred from other places and was now the deputy manager of the third floor. She was highly appreciated by the owner of the secluded house. Seeing that she was about to threaten his position, he had to suspect her first, regardless of whether she was the spy or not. Humph! Hong Yahai snorted coldly and pressed the button on his watch. He said angrily, Listen up, whoever sees Xingjiao, immediately tell her to come to the lounge on the third floor. Everyone, gather on the third floor. As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere in the secluded house became tense. The sound of footsteps between the floors was continuous. Within a few minutes, more than 10 burly men in suits gathered together. They all looked nervous and didn't know what was going on. Then, a woman wearing a slightly revealing professional robe with a curvaceous figure appeared. Her face could not be considered beautiful, but there was a charming look in her eyes that made one's heart tremble. She was very flirtatious, and any man would not be able to resist her coquettish gaze. She was the Xingjiao that Hong Yahai mentioned. She was the favorite of the owner of the secluded house and the new sales expert of the secluded house. As long as she was involved, there was no customer that she couldn't get. Section Chief Hong, why did you call me here? Xingjiao asked with some dissatisfaction. Don't play dumb in front of me. Did you let the thief in? Hong Yahai questioned without distinguishing between right and wrong. Xingjiao was a stunner. Hong Yahai had thought about her before. At first, he even touched her, but in the end, he was scolded by the owner of the secluded house and was slapped in public. From then on, he hated Xingjiao to the core and wanted to rape her first before killing her. What thief? Xingjiao was confused. Him. Hong Yahai stood in front of Li Daochong and pointed at his nose as if saying, Don't pretend in front of me. Who is he? Xing Jiao didn't know Li Daochong at all. Li Daochong, who had been watching the performance of these guys silently, frowned when he was slandered as a thief and pointed at him. If you don't want to lose a finger, get out of here. As soon as he said that, you're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.